Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about us at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. And the second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we are going to be talking about our second hours. This is more than just what do we want, but talk about the structure of the days and how we're going to kind of approach those. I've got some ideas, and I want to kind of bring them up to the group and have us all kind of have a round table about that. We'll go back next week, back to my studio, but I need to work on this a little bit, and I need everybody's input on this part. Tomorrow we'll do ruthless reviews for audio. So we've had a couple mic issues recently in the last couple of weeks, so I think it's worth us kind of digging back into that and making sure everything's working there well. Wednesday, special announcement, which is all I can say. The Thursday is the Belfast team, the Belfast Method team, is coming in to show us how they do it. So how do they do the remote takeovers? So they're going to all come in and talk about that a little bit on Thursday. Friday is we're going to focus on shoestring productions. So a lot of times, we talk about trucks and big, constellations, but a lot of us started with a laptop and a webcam. So we're going to talk a little bit about the very basics of how to do a one-person show. So, and then, of course, there was a big question about whether we were going to do on the 25th, where we're going to have the education hour. We're not doing any cooking or any Belfasting, but we will be still doing the education hour. So from 8 to 10 on the 25th, we'll still be doing our education hour. And then, of course, Sunday is general discussion. So that's what we have coming up for this week. And now I'm going to hand it off to our Monday host, Liberty White.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. I am Liberty White. And remember, you are the producer of the show. So we need those questions so that we can answer them and make this a jam-packed hour. And we'll start with the first question. Over to you, Bill.
Mitchell Hill here on the panel has us off and running this morning from Wilmington, Delaware. He says, how do you charge for your services? Flat rate, hourly, trade? Feel free to tell us what kind of business you're in as well.
Hi.
Oh my goodness! Right off the bat, I got bumped up. I come from theater as a backdrop, so I got paid nothing. And but when I got into the video production, early days in Los Angeles was in a union, and so that was lovely having somebody else negotiate your rates, and everybody had that expected concept that you could come look to the book and know at this hour you went into overtime, at this hour you went into double time. Moving up to the Seattle area, you have to wear many hats. And as a trade, I provide a service. And consequently, I do charge hourly on the corporate side, but there are also project-based concepts, which is very tricky. And oftentimes with the client being inexperienced, they will continue to add. And that's where you have to understand what a change request is and be very clear up front. And it's a maturity concept that I'm still growing into. And that's some of the history of are you providing a service or are you creating a product? Now with Madeline Smithberg, we are creating a product. At the same time, we're providing a service. So we're learning and growing. How do you get paid all along the way?
Yeah, because you've got to be careful of scope creep. That's a good one, Sky. Mitchell?
Age and experience has pushed me to hourly rates from flat rates. It used to be that you were charging for the equipment and facilities that you had. And now that I'm pretty much working by myself with everybody else being a subcontractor, I just charge a flat rate, a hourly rate for everything I do. When I come in my room and I turn on the equipment, whether I'm doing animation, motion graphics, or just plain editing, or just making decisions for the client, it's an hourly rate. And what's interesting is part of that, and it's one of the reasons why I brought up the question, is that when a client hires you to edit, let's say, and you're not being supervised, you're actually being hired as a producer too. So you kind of have to take that into account, that you're making decisions that a producer would make about how much time you should spend in the studio. It's just the way to go.
All right, Alex.
So I'm the opposite. I mean, we definitely do line items when we're forced to by clients, but in general, I will do almost everything I can do to do a flat rate. So I try to calculate. I use hourly to figure it out, and I figure out how much time I'm going to spend on things and everything else. but I really don't like clients thinking about hours. And so, I like clients to think about like, this is the package. Now, I think there's some things you can't do that with if you don't know what it's going to look like. If you're going to do, if it's kind of an open-ended thing, hourly makes more sense because you just don't know. But for many, 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 many shows, probably 95% of the shows I've done, they're flat rates. They're like, this is how much, now I list very detailed what you're going to get. So if you change that, you'll get another flat rate. So it's not like, this is how many days we're going to spend on it. This is what we're going to do. And I calculate all those out and then I just give you a number. And I kind of, when clients ask me about it, I've had a client once ask me, I think I told the story, but they said, well, why don't you break it down? I said, well, do you ask how much, so if you go to a restaurant, do you ask how much the cook is getting paid and how much they're paying for the power and how much are they paying for the flour? No, you just want to know how much the spaghetti is. And I was like, in this case, the spaghetti is $14,000. And I was like, and I was like, and it's really good. So I think that, I like to be focused on getting it done because I make a lot of decisions that the client won't make, and I'll take hits to I consciously will take hits to my own margin to get a better product. The reason I do it is not so I can make more, but that I can pack more quality and I can steal from over here to give over there, and I can do something over here, and I can just decide I'm going to make less, and then I can just do whatever I'm going to do. Because I find that the best thing to do for clients is to constantly try to give them more than they paid for every single time, like have it feel that way that they, and I have to figure out how to do that. And I like to have the freedom to not have to do that all in front of them, because then what happens is they don't know how to manage all of that. Like, oh, we saved over here, so we spent over here, or we did this over here. And all this back and forth of stuff, they can't, most corporations can't manage. So it's easier and a lot of corporations we work with just want the number. Like, they don't care. They look at all that stuff like, oh, sure. And then they just want the number. So if you're working with corporate, they just want the number. If you're working with Hollywood, they want line items, and then they'll pick at them forever, which is why I don't do very many jobs in LA. Anyway.
All right, Charles.
Yeah, so for post-production, let's say if we're doing color for a series, usually we'll assign a certain amount of hours per episode, right? And then we tend to always slightly go over, but I'll take that on me because I'm trying to make it look as best as possible, so that'll be that. Sometimes we'll do a per minute thing. If it's an indie film, we'll do, well, how long is it? And let's check your budget. What can we do? What are you trying to accomplish? Is there a look that we could place upon the whole thing, like a tone curve upon the whole thing, and then go in and tweak certain scenes to get you to where you want to be? If it's a commercial, usually it's a flat fee and there's a certain amount of hours to grade, and we'll probably do like 3 or 4 passes. If after the first pass there's something drastically wrong, then we need to readdress what our goals are, just to make sure that we're on the same boat. If it's for graphics, I have a day rate. It's been my day rate forever. So that's usually how we pan things out. But it's always the balance between trying to give them the number you think you'll need, and then balance that. If they want to give you a budget, you can work with that and work backwards. Usually that'll work best, but sometimes they don't want to give you a number. So you have that tug of war. Do you go back and forth?
And then just Charles, to add to that, if they go over your day rate, do you have that also just for those who are watching who might be curious?
As far as like it's going to need more time.
Yeah, if there's more time needed, like you've gone past that day rate and then it's overtime. Do you have that in advance for them, or how do you work that out?
That's usually in the contract, depending on the relationship that we have. I have a lot of old clients that I still work with, and we have an understanding that if we have a couple of changes, I don't mind making those changes because I do want it to look as good as possible. That might be the artist in me. I'm trying to put out the best thing that I can within the time that we have, obviously. But in the contracts, we do have, well, if we're going to add this much time, or there's a per minute charge or per whatever charge. And then if it's beauty work, that's a whole nother story, because usually we just sit with the client until the skin and everything looks right. The issue with beauty work is you can't show the work to anybody else. There's an unspoken rule about not showing the before and after for stars. So they sort of have to know you from the industry.
Got it. All right, Chris.
I could talk about this topic for an hour, no problem. I've written and published articles about it, and if anybody's ever interested in, one-on-one consultation in after hours or whatever, I'll gladly do it. But what I will say is that a lot of the type of work that the people on this panel do, in my mind, is analogous to being a cab driver. And Alex is definitely an exception because he's doing big, giant, event type shows. But if you were to get in a cab at, say, LaGuardia Airport and say, give me a price to take me to the Empire State Building, and that guy might say, it's $85 or something. And as soon as he pulls out of the airport, you go, hey, I've never seen Coney Island. Can we swing by there? All of a sudden, you've changed the rules that you agreed upon, and that's a change order. And so the number one thing is you really have to learn how to value your time, your family, and make a decision very early on as to the type of life that you want to live. And the rest is just a big math problem to figure it all out. But again, I could talk about this for probably 2 hours, easy.
Sounds like we might need to put that in the second hour brain dump later on. All right, Courtney.
Well, for teleprompting services, which I have a company that does, it's a corporation, and because of that, we don't get trapped by the California requirements that you break out all your labor as at the labor all work as employees of the production company. My employees are my employees, and I do their tax withholding and have workers' compensation insurance and all of that on them, and I don't break that amount out. I give them a flat fee for a day that includes the operator and the equipment, just for an 8-hour day. I do charge extra for overtime, and we normally don't do half-day rates. Half-day rates, I will give them a break on a half-day rate, and I base our rates on an 8-hour day because other people base theirs on a 10-hour day. And with a teleprompter, you're usually not there the whole day. You don't have to be there the whole day most of the time for the lighting and the setup and the building of the sets. I can save them some money just by giving them an 8-hour flat. That includes the operator. If we give them a half-day rate, it'll be 10% off our regular daily rate, and I still pay the operator for a full 8 hours. So I don't cut the operator's pay at all. I just take a little bit out of the margin for the equipment. And that way I find we're more competitive, and we don't run into problems with having to deal with the state. And I pay operators overtime after 8 and double time after 12. So, and that's a state labor board requirement in California. So
that's a key word there, to be competitive. All right, Jeffrey.
So yeah, I do a lot of enterprise video back and forth. A lot of it wasn't on site, and of course, last year and a half was virtual. And we always do a flat rate, and it's very important that we put a flat rate. It's very important we put a good rate together, because if we make it too low, then the companies will pretty much think that it's a joke, and they're not going to entertain that. But we don't want to go too high with that, because then that would be pricing on the range, and we'd have to figure out what the value would be for that. The other thing is, some of these companies will then say, well, we'll take care of your air travel, we'll take care of your hotel. The best thing to do is to not do that, and put that into your rate, so you can control your whole destiny from start to finish. If you need to change flights, that's on you. You don't have to talk to anybody out there on there except for your team, and get that going. Make sure you control the whole thing, and then of course make sure you have a rate that, because sometimes some of that stuff bleeds into week 2, week 3, week 4, and then week 5, which you didn't even expect. And make sure that you can cover everything that you need to do with bigger events or smaller events as well.
Yeah, doing the work up front to just make sure, as everyone has said, that line item, the quality of life, and making sure that you take care of your team and putting your best product forward for your client. Like, we spent a little bit of time on this, but it was definitely necessary. So let's go to the next question, Bill.
Next one comes from Paul Wallace, here in the panel often, and he says from Austin, Texas, can we talk about office hours as an incubator for new shows? How many panelists are contemplating doing a new show or podcast?
Courtney.
I don't know about creating a new show or a podcast, but I always thought it would be fun to do old radio dramas virtually over this, and each actor, and or you could have a sound effects person handling all the sound effects, and a musically talented person doing the music cues under, and then a Belfast method type of mixing it all together and do some old radio shows. I don't know what it would cost to license those old scripts, but I'm sure they're available on the internet somewhere. So that to me would be an interesting side podcast deal. Side hustle.
Mitchell?
I built my Zoom room, and I'm here on this panel originally for a reason. And that reason was I really wanted to educate my clients or my customers on what high quality video and audio and lighting should look like and sound like. And I think that in itself, other than the fact that we all look great and we're beautiful people, is very important as a regular second hour issue, or maybe a YouTube. Originally, I was going to do a YouTube video before I was introduced to office hours. It specifically was a 3-step process to improving your Zoom image. If I were to do that, I'd like to do that under the auspices of office hours, because there's a lot of talent here and a lot of specific people you could go to in an interview, rather than just do a single stand-up and hope that your charisma carries it all together. So I'd like to see some collaborative type programs with office hours.
All right, Alex?
Yeah, I think that it's really important as you start to think about those shows. I'm thinking more structurally, is to think about how they become sustainable. So it's easy to think about the first 2 or 3. It's hard to think about the next. When people say, "Oh, I'm going to build a podcast," I'm like, okay, write 20 podcasts, like 20 episodes of that, and think about. And I usually try to think about it in boxes. Like I try to take a month and then break it up into different subjects or different things that I'm going to cover in that month, or how I'm going to do it. But no matter what, you have to think about the structure of the show and how it becomes sustainable. Once you get to about 20, I find you can figure out some model that is sustainable, to make that actually work. But I hope that, we keep on building on what we're doing. And by the way, Courtney, I think that the radio show is a really great idea. A couple of us talking also about Zoom Shakespeare, like where we all, we could get backgrounds and things and use Zoom OS, Zoom ISO and Zoom OSC to build a show that a bunch of us want to work on. So anyway, something to think about.
And if you miss Super Saturday, you've got to go back and watch it, because that just shows the power of collaboration within the community.
By the way, it's not what you can do by yourself. This is really all about how you can Zoom. Super Saturday showed more than anything else what happens when a whole bunch of people start working together, and everyone lifts what they can, and I think that it was amazing.
All right, Bill.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it for quite a long time. I've really enjoyed the times I've been able to host here, and it's been a fascinating thing. And Alex's ideas about this audience interaction thing really have sparked so many interesting ideas from me. How could that concept be applied to the things that I love doing? So I'm actually working with my wife on some ideas about something that hopefully I can maybe get off the ground in the next quarter or so.
We do have a lot of partners working together on this, so that's something that is burgeoning underneath the hours as well. John?
It might be nice to incubate some after hours shows in the middle of the night when Australia and Europe wake up, because it's getting a little quiet in those hours. I'd like to see a regular program from Australia or from Europe, possibly.
Oh, that sounds really good. Nigel?
Yeah, so some of you know in After Hours, I'm really interested in cognitive biases and how we think and the way we think. So I've been writing a Substack for a few weeks to try and get into a rhythm of how I write and what I think about that. And I'd love to find a way, and I don't know whether it fits into Office Hours, where we talk about some of those things in a non-political way, so we all can learn how we think and be more effective. But the thing that sort of is causing my brain to struggle is I don't necessarily want it to be the ping pong match, which sometimes this format gives us. And I don't really know how to make a discussion without it being like that. But cognitive biases, thing I'm interested in trying to work my brain through that.
And Jeffrey?
Yeah, Nigel, I'm thinking about that too because I last week I started building my Zoom ISO OSC system, and my plan is to actually do a four-person show this coming next year on my regular channel. But I've been thinking about other ways that I can utilize this into office hours as well. So bringing four people on, doing a topic, and then going from there. One thing to keep in mind is you got to really ask yourself the question, is this going to be current and live, or can it be something where it gets recorded and then, posted like 5-6 weeks down the road? Because you could, if you set it up, you can actually do multiples in one day and then put it out. And then, of course, the other thing for me is getting guests and keeping with schedules with guests on a weekly basis.
I'll actually be on Conversation with Tony Mobley this week, and I'm looking at more children's programming because we just finished an accelerator program on that. So I'll be probably popping in more with the education crew to see if there could be some collaboration there. All right, next question.
Mitchell Hill's up next from Wilmington, Delaware, and he says some of us will be working over the holidays. Do you charge a premium for working after hours, weekends, or holidays?
Courtney.
Well, in the union world, you do charge a premium for after a certain number of hours, but not necessarily for a weekend, or the only exception to that is union holidays, of which there are only about 7 that are specifically listed, and that would be Christmas Day, New Year's Day, etc. And those days are double time in the union world. Myself, as far as overtime, only if it after hours doesn't really matter if it's less than 8 hours. It could be in the middle of the night. We don't charge extra for that as long as they don't go over 8 hours.
Jason.
I should start by saying what I do is not like being a taxi driver. It is extremely unique per job and per client. And as such, if I have corporate work, for example, that I know is going to go into a holiday, I will build it into the agreement. If I have, some sort of one-off or some sort of strange situation, which I don't want to do, I simply won't do it. It's as simple as that. So long story short, probably not.
Alex.
I don't really take holidays. so anyway, I don't really charge any differently because my weekends are my weekends and my days are my days. Like I have I like patterns, and so I don't really I definitely don't charge clients differently over one period or another. I just but I don't schedule into it if I need to if I for some reason want to take the time off. But when I take time off is usually not connected to a public date.
And Mitchell?
I agree 100% with Alex. I prefer to work and work and work until the job is done. And if the client specifically asks me to work on, say, like Christmas, I might consider it. But for the most part, it's kind of up to me to decide whether the job is going to carry me through a holiday. For example, right now, I'm just wrapping up a big pharmaceutical job that involves a bunch of different programs. And I had the advantage of a later deadline. It might carry me into the holidays, but I worked like crazy to get it done, and I won't be going into the holidays. So it was kind of my decision. So as long as it's my decision, don't mind doing it. When I start charging overtime for certain things, and with all respect to my brothers and sisters in the union, I get nitpicked by HR people or accountants. So I try to stay away from it altogether.
Charles.
Yeah, so usually try not to work on the weekends or the holidays. Now that being said, it happens more often than I'd like. If it's for the weekend and the reason why we're working or possibly working during the weekend is because the client unapproved something that was already approved or changing something that we already agreed on, they're probably going to get charged. For the holidays, we actually just had a client call, and they're obviously in a situation, and since it's a very big company, they don't mind the number that you throw at them. I've been in positions where they double the budget just because they need it when they need it because they have things on their end that they need to meet. So at that point, let's just get it done as quickly as possible.
People pay for problems to be solved. So, all right, Alan.
And I'm pretty much the same as everybody else on this side of the pond. And in sort of my industry, my day rate is the day rate. Doesn't matter what day of the year it is. That's how much I charge. And so if I want to work Christmas, I charge what I do, but it's the same pretty much. Only one is a New Year's Eve. I occasionally, because there's a different type of show usually, I will charge differently. But that's it. It's the only time.
All right, next question.
Comes from Noah Sargent here on the panel, and Noah has a question that's baffled me for a long time. Why do restaurants rarely utilize audio absorption and diffusion techniques? Hard, flat surfaces everywhere make for extra noisy environments.
Mitchell?
Well, they know their food and they might know their hospitality, but they don't necessarily know sound effects and sound quality. And because they're usually constrained financially, that's the last thing that gets done. And usually I get called in as a friend of a friend to fix a problem, and I walk in and it's a beautiful vaulted ceiling with wood and beams and such, and no treatment at all. Or if they do something, they hang one of those small panels on the ceiling. So I don't think they think about it. I don't think it's in their mindset until they have a problem. And when they have a problem, they want it fixed.
Alex?
I agree with Mitchell. I think that a lot of times restaurants think about how it looks. They have an architect that comes in to do the look and feel. They think about how the food tastes, how to present the food. They don't think about how the din. And I think some people like the din. They like that sound of that you're in, and there's an energy that you get. I know that I pick out restaurants probably more for audio than almost anything else, the food and then the audio, but it's very close. If you put a band in a restaurant, I won't go in. If you play music, I won't go in. If you have anything on TVs, I generally won't go in. So anyway, I have an ADD problem, so I just don't want to have any of it. And so there are a handful of restaurants that I've gone to where they make things that look like they are beams, but they are actually sound absorbers. And they'll look like just a row of beams across the top, and it was kind of low ceiling. It was this little restaurant I remember in North Beach that had this. And what was amazing is you couldn't hear anything past your table, and I would go there once a week because it was just I would bring friends there, and that's the place because you just had this really great conversation sitting over a table over some good food, and you weren't distracted by anything, and you could hear each other, and you didn't have to raise your voice. And I think that it's a huge missing for most restaurants.
That also sounds like a really great second hour and opportunity for
Yeah.
some folks
Absolutely.
in OH. Nigel?
Yeah, so most of the points being made, it's a question of time and money, and also the proprietor, whether that person is the chef or is a professional restaurateur. So we do lots of work in restaurants, but what mostly they resist is the design time. They go, well, I'll wait 9 months to get the right stove, but I need this thing in tomorrow when it's the AV. And where we find people who are willing to spend time on the design and money on the design, you can achieve some great effects.
All right, next question.
Next one comes from TJ Asher here on the panel, and he wonders what is the mission statement for the Office Hours nonprofit organization?
Alex?
I actually don't know what I put into the application. I mean, the mission statement has been the same for the last 30 years. It's creating a global conversation where no one's left out. So, I mean, that's what my mission statement has been for a long time, and generally the mission statement for every company that I build or every organization that I work on. So, so I think that is the overall piece of it. I think that our mission statement is specifically from an official perspective, educating people in doing media production. I think that's kind of it. But we'll come up with something that makes sense. But that's kind of always been the core of what we're up to.
Next question.
Next one comes from Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin, also on the panel. And Jeffrey says, has anyone pushed the M1 Mac Mini to see how many 1080p screens can be implemented with Zoom ISO?
Alex?
Yeah, we haven't done it with we've only done it with SDI output, so I don't know about what the NDI situation is. I know with SDI, it's limited to 4, or at least that's what we've gotten, and it's a Zoom limitation. The Mac Mini itself runs at about 15-20% capacity, and that's the 8 gig basic Mac Mini is barely moving the needle. But Zoom has a current limitation of 4 per computer. We're hoping that we can persuade them to expand that to 8 so that we can put in 8K cards and replace the duos that we have now, so that we could get a lot more capacity with a lot less computers. But we'll see how that goes.
Ari?
So I don't know if this qualifies as a stress test, but I'm running a 16 gig M1 Mac Mini, in the pluggable configuration, 1 native screen and 4 out of the pluggables. I will say that I've been using it virtually daily, weekdays, for over a month and a half in production. It is rock solid, and big kudos to the team. And it hasn't caused any problems at 1080, and it's great.
All right, next question.
Courtney Gooden in Hollywood here on the panel says, Alex mentioned a type of BNC connector that is the only one he uses. Can you talk about what makes that brand and model superior to all others?
So the signal is the same. So I will say it's not like it has a better signal ratio or something than everything else. These are Neutrik rear twist connectors, and what you'll see here is that there's a couple things about them that I'm a little obsessed about. One is I like colors. So I color my cables as well as I cover it. And you'll notice that I'm kind of roughly starting to go towards a resistor code that goes across here. So I will put these in. That means that in many environments I can have 10 different ones really, really easily and know what I have on both ends without any labeling. Because a lot of times we're not labeling, but I can just grab them and throw them down. And I know that if I plug 1 through 10 in, and if you used different colored cables, now you multiply that by 10 for each cable. And anyway, so what I can do is I can take a whole bunch of camera things that aren't necessarily labeled, throw them all on, and just have them come out the other end. And so that becomes really, really nice. The other thing about them is the rear twist itself. So what happens is that I can twist this cable, I can twist the connector against instead of the cable there, and it's much easier for me to grab onto. In a very dense router situation, I can reach in and pull things out and put them in with my fingers, not with a trumpeter. And that is and the trumpeter, the problem with the trumpeter is not just that it's inconvenient and you have to figure out where you put it or where someone moved it or whatever. It's that it adds leverage to the connector. If you're actually putting them in and out of something, of an actual device, if you're not really careful, a long lever connected to your thing is putting pressure on your connectors. And so I don't like using trumpeters unless I have to, because I feel like unless the person is really paying attention to going straight in, straight out, they're going to constantly be pulling on my my connectors. And so I like being able to do them by hand. And again, I really like the being able to just reach in there and grab onto them. And when you get used to this, all I can say is when you get used to using these and you get somebody else's, you're like, oh, this is going to hurt, or I'm going to have to use a trumpeter. And when you're just putting things together, especially in smaller kits, not having, it's wear and tear on my fingers. If I'm doing 100 of these, connecting something, this is a lot less wear and tear on my fingers to do it. And because again, I can color code them, I can do a lot of other things to them. I don't know when Marty Brennis is who got us into these years ago. And it got to a point where I just started throwing the other ones away. Like I just didn't want to have them around in the kit. We gave them to community colleges and we didn't throw them away, but we gave them to community colleges and local, the open television stations, stuff like that, just to get them out of the kit. Anyway, that's it.
Courtney.
Well, thanks, Alex, for that explanation. And I had a similar problem with my fat sausagey fingers.
Mm-hmm.
I have trouble, especially with these type of recessed BNCs, which we have on all our cases, since you have to stick it in. And I came up with a solution. Of course, it's on my finger here. In the 3D printing world, I printed these little collars out of TPU.
Right.
And they're squishy enough, and you can retrofit them to any BNC connector like this, which makes it easy to go in and twist. It gives you a hexagonal collar that's attached. And since you can retrofit them, you never have to cut off a BNC and replace it with anything, and it gives you this, does the same function. I agree with you about the trumpeter tool. They're usually like 12 inches long, and you can't put them in your pocket. You can't put them on your belt.
Yeah.
What do you do with them?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think what you're talking about is genius to retrofit the ones that already exist. But what I will say is that these are not that much more expensive than buying the other, a high quality connector.
I price them. They're like $9 a piece.
No, they're not. No, they're not. You're buying.
Well, maybe buy them in bulk.
I buy them by
price I got on.
They're. I think for us they're like $1.70 some a head. Yeah, and that's with the backing. But we buy them in packs of hundreds. Like we don't buy one. We buy 100 at a time. So that's the difference, or 500 at a time typically.
Yeah, well, you get them wholesale for that price. You
Yeah.
buy one at a time from
definitely, yeah.
from
Someone else is buying
Seven
them like we do, and then putting them up on Amazon for one at a time. That's a pretty good deal. I don't know why I'm not doing that, guy.
These only cost about 3 cents.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
All right, next question.
Moving on to George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia. George says, are there plans to share New Year's Eve countdown around the clock on office hours or after hours, or just let it happen?
John.
Somebody brought this up on After Hours a couple weeks back ago, and I shared what we did for the Millennium Change. We found customers in several of the time zones around the world, and we dedicated that hour to each one of those people. We did around the world broadcasts, starting at the Christmas Islands and then all the way back around. It was a lot of fun. I'm sure we could do something like that in After Hours.
Alex?
I'm totally down to doing something. So if we want to do something that is maybe the whole day, to whoever is there, is that we kind of pop up and say, kind of a hooray and where it's from and everything else. I think it'd be a lot of fun. We've done that with Twit, or Leo has. I don't know if I can manage it all day, but I'd be happy to manage at least some of it, or be around for some of it, and we can talk about stuff and hang out. It'd be fun to turn it into a whole show, but
Yeah, it'd be fun.
yeah. So I don't know if we have enough time, but I think we should do something this year, and then think about what we want to do next year, and then do something grand. As far as the actual countdown in New York City, I'll see if we can get some folks to talk about behind the scenes about how that gets done afterwards, because I know some folks that work on that. So we'll see.
That would be creative.
Yeah.
All right. Bill?
Moving on to the next one, Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California says, would highly directional speakers be a good application for a presenter who prefers not to wear headphones in a remote meeting?
Back to you, Bill.
And my answer is no. And the reason is, if you're speaking into any kind of microphone, whether it's head-worn, desk-mounted, or whatever, it is here. Your ears are here. If you're not using some sort of monitoring thing that is close and inserted in your ear, your speaker is going to be getting into your microphone, and that's going to create the feedback loop that everybody dislikes. Now, it might not be feedbacking, actually, but you're going to get into that circumstance where Zoom is doing some muting or some electronic thing to try to suppress that loop from taking place, and it's just never going to be as good as having some sort of in-ear monitoring, whether that's a bud or headphones or something. Speaker open is never going to be as good.
And Mitchell?
Yeah, using an open speaker is tricky business and generally will cause problems, particularly if you don't know what you're doing or you're new to it. I'm sorry to admit that I do use an open speaker, but I have the right equipment here to keep that from being an issue, and a panel that would let me know instantly if it were a problem. I'll probably get around to earphones for next year, but for now, I like the natural sound of a speaker at a low volume in the background, just over my shoulder. Lets me hear everything very well.
Sounds like something we could talk about in After Hours or second hour. Alex?
Yeah, so we have some clients that, especially politicians, who don't want to have anything in their ear. So they don't want to have any impression that someone's talking to them. And so we've needed to figure out a way to use speakers. There's two different ways that we've done it. One is with a lav on the front and a small speaker behind them, down kind of a little middle of their back, that's set very low. They can hear them naturally, and their body acts as a natural damper for it. And then the other way is that the speaker is right under the teleprompter, and a shotgun is very far forward from the teleprompter, pointed down, at their sternum. And what we have found is that when we then use Dugan auto mix to basically use the mic and speaker to push each other down, and push each other back. So it's not just a straight mix; it's using a Dugan auto mix to kind of push back and forth. And we don't do any of these events without Dugan auto mix. So and we have found that when tuned well, and it does take someone who knows what they're doing, like Brian Maddox, to tune that up. And a lot of times with 80% of them, we've literally had Brian come in from the far end, whether it's a big room of 1,000 people or one person, and he sits there and listens to someone talking, and he tweaks it all and tunes it all to where it needs to go. So I'm not saying it's not complicated, but once it happens, it's completely natural. All they have to do, what's great for them is they can just sit down and start talking. They don't have to have anything wired to them. We have some folks, especially high profile folks, that are pretty sensitive to people touching them. So being able to have them be able to sit down and not interact with any wires is a big plus.
Next question.
Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California, is up next. He says, could you see 3D video for Zoom calls in the future?
Alan.
Zoom calls, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe, depends how much it's pushed by. I mean, Meta is, or former Facebook, is going to be pushing it, I reckon, especially with their tie-in with Oculus and everything. And then there's also companies like Portal, who do the hologram systems for linking. So there's, to a limited extent, but 3D and VR video, it's not there in the, for the general population yet. So I mean, yes, but not for quite some time.
Jeffrey.
While it's not totally impossible, the bigger problem is that we have a hard time getting people to get cameras and good audio video to begin with. So getting a 3D camera put in there, that'd be super tough. And then of course people having the equipment to actually view it properly and which type of 3D you would actually use, because there's many different standards out there. Those would be the big hurdles that you'd have to get over to just have a 3D. And then of course you also have to create a version of the meeting that would not be 3D, so people that couldn't see the 3D can actually be part of it.
And Alex?
Yeah, I think that just solving people being able to interact with each other is the first step. And I think that we have gotten the closest in the world to mastering that process. But that we're still a very small segment. And I think that we can't get most people to use a webcam, like an external webcam, let alone, building up a 3D view of them. And I think that I really have thought about this a lot. And I just feel like the 3D-ish nature, the avatars, everything else is really going to not make people feel better. It's going to make them feel worse. Because it's going to give them, I told the story, I think last week, the best way to kill ants is to give them sugar and then slowly cut the sugar with Splenda until it's all Splenda. They can't tell the difference and they just starve to death. And I think that is something that we do in social media, which is that we feel like we're having a connection, but we're not. We're not actually connecting our lower brains together, like really feeling like we're connected. And I think that when we get our audio and video fixed, when we figure out a set of rules of engagement, we've learned how to do that in a way that we actually are getting connected, in a way but I think that when you have text, Twitter conversations and stuff on Facebook, and especially with avatars, I just think that, and I've been in and out of that world for 20 years. And I feel like it is going to make people feel more hollow than they already do when they get into it, because their front brain is telling them that this is a new community and their lower brain is saying, no, it isn't. And it's just and that juxtaposition between the two is going to cause people to be more depressed, until they get to a point where it's photoreal. And then but that's going to be it's going to take time, like 20 years, maybe 10. Next question. Oh, sorry. That's your job.
Next question.
It's okay. Habits, we all have them. Tony Mobley's up next from Noonan, Georgia. And Tony says, can we talk about how great Super Saturday looked?
Tony.
So I first want to say thank you, community, for my chance to participate in that great day. It was really awesome to participate. I want to say that I was looking at everyone else's show on an iPhone, iPad, and my computer, and it looked absolutely gorgeous on all three. And I just wanted to see what other people thought about it.
Lois?
Well, I agree it looked really good. I actually didn't notice how it looked at when I was looking at it, because the content was fantastic. And all of those shows were just wonderful. But when I went back and looked at it, I'm going, oh, there's not very many errors, glitches, missteps, because we're all doing this volunteer mostly. And yet we're doing such a good job. And if there was anything that was not quite right, you fixed it before anyone in the audience noticed. So I think it was fantastic.
Oh, I guess I toss it to myself now. Saturday was phenomenal. And it just kind of shows the power of even after hours and what took place. Like, yes, from the morning all the way to the last show. And I remember even saying to Tony, like, you had people on your show across 3 different continents, and even looking at the graphics on the cooking show and how everything flowed. Like, it was, I think the term someone said in after hours, it was graduation, graduation day. And then to have the community come together to support each other, to salute each other, to thank each other, to share how important, office hours has been to them. It was both the interaction with the community online, but then also in after hours. And it just shows the power of the community. So it looked good, but it also looked good like inside as well. And Sky.
I took Nigel's opportunity of putting it up and viewing it on YouTube on my big screen monitor, big screen television in my living room. So I consumed a product as I have consumed Netflix and Apple TV and CBS and NBC and 50 years of consuming content. And that's the challenge for me is the heartfelt that we did a thing is phenomenal. That the toss off of the script was from here to here was outrageous. People don't understand the heavy work that so many people put behind it. But if you're going to consume something, just like we did with the restaurant concept earlier, what is the comparatives that you're putting it next to? And if we're putting it up next to Netflix, if we're putting it up next to Apple TV, we are on our way. And so that's the comparative thing that I don't mean to be the Debbie Downer here, but I think that's where are we putting ourselves next to cable TV? I mean, cable, local cable or PBS, and even PBS has its different quality levels. So I guess that's that qualitative thing. Did we do an amazing thing? Absolutely. Do I celebrate? Absolutely. And I'm loving that we're continuing to move forward in this new world of 4K and HDR. I think that's going to separate us because nobody's doing that.
Alex?
I think that we have to remember that almost nothing we see on TV is live. So when you say, what do we compare ourselves to? There is nothing that I've seen with a budget less than $50,000 that was as good as Saturday. We have to remember, like people say, people always talk about, football, like Sunday Night Football. Sunday Night Football, when you look at all the salaries of everybody involved and everything else, is probably about $50 million a show. Like just so you know, like it's like $50 million a show. The athletes that are there, the tech, the everything, just the tech is millions of dollars a show. And so the thing is that so we can't, we want to be very careful about what you compare it to. But I would say I've not seen one, and maybe not under $200,000. It is, we don't see very much live. I mean, where you see live is like red carpet. Did we beat red carpets that ABC and everybody else does? Absolutely. We crush them. we crush them into little bits and pieces, into that area. And we did this all in our spare time. It's amazing. It is amazing what we did. I think that there are very few purely live that aren't in a studio, because I want to take all the studio stuff out, because that's a fixed thing that's done the same way all the time. It's built up. It's got a huge capital investment in the front, and then people just run it, right? So get rid of all of that and start thinking about one-off studio and one-off non-studio live on broadcast. We beat them all. Like literally, for what we did, we beat all of them, in that environment. Because because they're not, when you watch broadcast do it, they don't even know how to do that. Like, it's horrible. It's just, and so doing it from people's homes, 10x better than what broadcast does with people from people's homes. So it was, I just want to make sure it's clear. There's very little you see. And when you compare apples to apples, we were at 10 to 100x of everything else around us. It is an amazing testament to what's possible in this group.
And our questions aren't staged. Like, these questions are coming in live as well.
And thank you, Alex. It was the comparatives that I was
confused. You just got to make sure Yeah, it's
I
like
wanted to understand what the
yeah, but comparing apples to apples, not close, not close.
Guy?
Yeah, I thought it went just beyond my expectations, or I think a lot of people's expectations, the look, the feel, and then just how tight it was, because we were tossing it from one, physical location to another. And then up in the cloud, we were using nice DCV to look at it. And we actually also had an SRT feed that was coming back out as a return feed at 10 megabit of the multi-view. And if you guys could see that, it was shockingly good. So what was going out on YouTube, if you thought that looked good, Sky, you should just see the 10 megabit SRT feed. It looked fantastic. So, and then I broke it down just a little bit, threw it into Final Cut to kind of look at the transitions, like how we hand it off. And I mean, it was pretty smooth. When you look at it, there's, we went from Damiante's show, we went from Todd's show over to Belfast. And this one, there was, some very cool visuals that looked tight. They were very crisp and clean. And then that transition to Accidental, I mean, if you could hear the comms to Accidental, I mean, it was fantastic in the back end to hear how prepared everybody was. And then the handoff right here was just come on. I'm going to have to go faster. Yeah, so it was just we go from Todd playing to Accidental to a card, and then from there, the gentleman on the stage was on. And then tossing it to Tony also went really well. It was just a card, and then Tony's graphic came in, and then he was on, and he was 1-2 second delay, and boom, he's talking, just going wow, 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 because he was shocked at how well it all went too. So hats off to everybody that worked on it. It went really well.
Thank you for that, Guy, because that really does put it into perspective of, like, if you want to say almost like no frames, no frames dropped in between. Alex?
I do think that we could probably, with a little bit of thought, take the things that we're doing on Saturday and tie them into a, maybe not as long, but hey, if we're doing a Belfast method and we're doing a cooking thing, let's time it all up so that we go from one to the other. Like that we just cruise over in a live stream and get used to those kinds of hands-offs. I think that would be something that is totally doable.
All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, in the credits for Jurassic Park, Ian Kelly is listed as a video engineer. What would the role of a video engineer be if the movie was shot on film? Would he be responsible only for video assist and playback systems on set?
Mitchell?
Pretty much back in the old days of film, excuse me. But with your, pardon me, if you're doing film and you're showing video, you have to do a 24 frame playback of the video, and you need an engineer that can properly time the video to make that happen. And that was probably happening back then. And nowadays, even though a lot of things are video or shot video on a Sony or an Arri or Red or whatever, you have a video village where a lot of the producers and executives and sometimes directors hang out, and they want to see the live video as it appears on the set. And there may also be some 3D elements involved where the actors have to integrate with something that's going on. So they might have a rudimentary version of the 3D space that they can see and feel and get an idea of what it's going to look like before they have to post it. I'm sure Courtney has a lot more on that than I do.
Right, Courtney?
Yeah, you covered most of it there. I know Ian Kelly, and he mainly does video assist. There was also a guy named Estes, I think, who did Kenneth Estes, who did video playback, 24-frame video playback for all the computer monitors that appeared in the control rooms and stuff. All of those computer monitors have to be gen-locked together, and they all have to be synchronized to the camera shutter. And another thing Ian specializes in as a video engineer, and he listed as video engineer rather than video assist operator. It's a different pay rate. Supervising video engineer kind of is the supervisor for all the video, including the 24-frame playback and the video assist. And what Ian will do is complex shows like that where they'll have multiple cameras, and there may be motion control rigs where the camera does several passes at the same rate because they're going to lay in digital dinosaurs in the background, and everything has to sync up, and they will have pre-visualization of what the dinosaurs are going to look like, and he'll do a pre-composite on the set so that the director can see the relationship of the actors to the soon, later to be animated dinosaurs. So they make sure the eye lines are correct and everything like that. So it becomes a much more complex than just recording the video assist out of the camera, out of the film camera, and playing it back. He does that as well. He also will edit together a whole sequence to make sure that the edit points work and that the screen direction works. And it's much more complex than your general video assist work does. And Ian gets a lot of those big jobs because he knows how to do all of that complex stuff very well, and he's equipped to handle all of that stuff on the set.
Noah?
Wow, that was covered so well, Courtney. That's awesome. The only thing I noticed when looking him up was the IMDb credit, and I don't know if this is the same Ian Kelly, but it lists as a senior rotoscope artist or a stereoscopic roto artist. So that sounds like special visual effects rather than video playback, which is what Courtney was talking about, if that makes sense.
Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael again, and we're back with Jurassic Park. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra, he notes, is performing Jurassic Park in concert. If you needed to rebuild VFX to remaster the film, would there be significant ramp-up time for the original artist to learn modern software? For example, Maya and Cinema 4D versus Softimage and Alias.
Charles?
Yeah, so I actually just happened to watch Jurassic Park because my lady had never seen the whole thing. Usually by this time, now that happened 28 years ago, right? So usually the main artist would have moved up to art director, a technical director, producer. So they're more guiding the junior people now. So they would probably not be the same people that are actually doing the work, but they would be guiding the vision. And also remember, that movie had a visual rhythm as far as like the VFX. It was very far ahead of its time when it came out. So you don't want to tweak things too much because now it's almost a cult classic. So it has a feel and texture and rhythm that you would have to, you can't change it. You can enhance it just enough for the remaster if you're going to do that, but you probably go back to the plates, at your original plates, and you would find everything was maybe 8-bit, you know? So how would you push that up to today's standards? Maybe they're going to do an HDR trim pass to get that in, but you would probably not have the same artists since it's been 28 years. They would probably guide the vision, and also for PR, it's actually good to have the same names associated with a remaster. So,
Alex?
Yeah, very rarely would you go back to the same artists. Like when we did the when the re-release was done for Star Wars, as an example, all the space shots with the X-wings and everything else, that was all done by one person, John Knoll. So he did it at his house on an 840 AV, and he did that all in electric image, and it dramatically was better. You know, so I don't think that we want to. I think that you could go back and rebuild a lot of these things, and I'd love to see Jurassic Park redone. I don't think you'd go back to Spaz or someone else to do the animations. I think you just use the current animators that you have with the current technology. I mean, that was the first time we ever did it. Black levels are all over the place. Like that's the biggest problem with the dinosaurs, is that the CG dinosaurs don't have any black levels, you know, and so it would be unbelievable to get the original plates and go back and rebuild them, because those plates will be in film, and so you could, you know, up-res it and everything else. I bet you they could make another $100-200 million on just taking those original plates if they're around, and upgrading it with new CG characters. It would a re-release. People would be very upset and they'd be apoplectic about it, but I don't think people are as sanctimonious about Jurassic Park as they are about other things. I think they're kind of like, it was a thing at the time, but I don't think it's like Star Wars. It doesn't have like a myth to it. It's just a movie. And so I think that we could go back and have a lot of fun with it. Yeah.
All right, we're going over just a little bit, but we're going to make sure that we get to all of your questions. And if we can zip through them, that'd be great.
By the way, I just want to say one thing. My bucket list on when I have enough time is I'm going to redo all the mats in Wizard of Oz. I'm not saying that they should re-release it, but they're so bad now that we have high res but they'd be so much fun to go in and just do a super high res version of the fields and all the other stuff that they did. So if anyone wants to play with that, you got to direct me on Discord, and we'll start making a plan. It'll take us years to do it anyway.
And now anyone watching Wizard of Oz over the holidays is going to look at it.
Oh no, I'm
completely-
sorry. The mats are so bad.
different now.
So bad. Sometimes they're like 10 feet away. They're like 10 feet away from the mat. So anyway.
All right, Bill, next question.
Glenn B. in Cheltenham in the UK says, how do the panelists think about reuse of material or methods when creating contracts with customers, retaining your own IP versus the customer owning it?
Alex?
Anything I deliver to the final play to the client for an event is pretty much theirs. Like, I'm not going to use that somewhere else. It has less to do with law and everything else, and more to do with the fact that I'm going to get more out of a great relationship with that client than I am going to any little nitpicking that I do on my own. Now, a lot of times I'll be somewhere and I'll shoot a bunch of stuff for the client, and then I'll shoot a bunch of other stuff too. So while I'm there, and also, so if I have the opportunity to have down days, I'll, and usually I set it up so I do have some down days that the client's not paying for if I'm going to be in Cambodia or I'm going to be in, Nigeria or something like that. And then I'll shoot a bunch of extra plates that I want to use for myself that aren't related to their project. So I take advantage of being somewhere and having gear with me, but I won't. But if I use it for their shoot, I won't. I usually just assume that that's part of their kit at that point.
Bill?
You should pay attention and learn some of what Title 17 says about copyrights, because it's an important part of this business. In the early days of my corporate career, I always had clients, because they were small companies, asking me to get into the gray areas of copyright violations, use a pop song against a commercial or whatever without clearing all the rights and the rest of that. It is a bad thing. And once you get to a certain level, you literally just can't do it. I have had people in corporate circumstances for big companies ask me to do that, and I've politely said, you really need to talk to your legal team about the risk that you're exposing yourself to for using copyrighted material in something, because you have deep pockets and you will potentially get slapped hard. Don't do it. So it's just something you have to be aware of. The bigger your customer, you're never going to win these things. And I have exactly the same attitude of Alex. I'm going to turn over all the rights to my client, because if push comes to shove, they can out-lawyer me 100 to 1.
Today's kind of turned into a pre-production 101 day. All right, next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware, here on the panel, says, how did you become a panelist on office hours? Do you have some particular talent the program needs?
Charles?
I don't know about talent, but the way that I started was I was learning so much from the group, just discussing things that I can't discuss with a lot of my family, let's say. So I wanted to be a part of that conversation, and also trying to better myself, because 1, English is not my first language. 2, I grew up with a stammer. 3, I don't like being in front of the camera. So this is me trying to get better at things as we're getting into this pandemic. This was in the beginning. Like, we're gonna be Zooming and video calling from our homes. Like, you have to push yourself to keep moving forward. So this was like, okay, this is my chance. And the community has been so welcoming, and so engaging and helpful with anything, because I didn't know anything about what microphone, live streaming, none. I knew graphics and color and animation. And I've learned so much that I wanted to give a little bit of myself back to the group. So anything that I can, I give back, because I've learned so much that it's changed the trajectory of my life and my career.
Yeah, as Alex a couple of days answered to my question, you don't learn flying by reading a book. You learn flying by taking flying lessons, and I want to learn flying. Well, I already did, because I have a pilot license, but I don't know how to produce these kind of shows. So I want to learn that in addition. And well, I hope some of my talents will be of use. We will see.
Ari?
I can't speak to talent, but I vividly remember the days, nay, weeks before pondering, should I be on the panel? Should I not be on the panel? Being extremely introvert, very camera shy. I was really gunning to push my limits and step way outside of the box. Very quickly, what followed was wanting to contribute back to the community, from which I've learned so much, and I'm very grateful. And it's wonderful to stand on the shoulders of really all the giants in the panel. So thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you here. Sky?
Well, as an editor, you sit in a dark room and live other people's lives. And so in many ways, we're introverts. Chris Fenwick and Charles and I, observe a two-dimensional in a three-dimensional, environment concept. But historically, I come from the theater and stage. So I'm used to being the extrovert on front and talking out loud to the back of the hall. And so what I started was, again, Guy Cochran said, hey, there's some people doing some really exciting things to help educators at the early days of the pandemic. And that was what I was very interested in supporting my wife. And that's where the education Saturdays are so critical to me still to this day. And Alex has said, as the mission statement is, education is a huge part of our mission. And so this is why I continue to set my alarm every day to get up, get dressed, get ready, and be here, because I'm very much a social creature, apparently. And this community, as again, Chris Fenwick, I credit him with an affinity group, is a group of peers that have a great opportunity of helping not me get better, but the world get better.
And Alex?
Yeah, I think that a couple things. One is that from doing all of this, what I find is that I learn a lot by talking. I know that sounds crazy, but like talking through things with people. And so being on the panel, like my whole life, what I've loved to do is take something and fix it, or make it better, or do something else. As a kid, I was just constantly tweaking things and working on things. And I love being a problem solver. And so for me, being on the panel is fun because it just forces my mind to be constantly problem solving for other people. I mean, I can't come up with the number of things that everyone comes up with every morning in our producers. All our producers come up with new things for us and I just find that to be fascinating every day. And you hear those and think about them differently when you're on the panel as opposed to when you're just watching the show. It is not the same to watch the show and to be on the panel. And so being on the panel helps you kind of move through that. Now that also is another version of that is being in after hours and helping people work that out. That may be a better place for a lot of folks to, they're not ready to do this part. I also have found that being willing to show things over the last 20 years or 25 years has been my avenue to success. And it's not, I grew up as a farmer, I grew up on a farm where you plant things that might take months or years to harvest. And I can say constantly putting things out, speaking at events, being part of things, being part of programs, being part of things that don't necessarily pay, has been the thing that got me to every other thing. It is the one thread that sits through everything. And when I started this, it was because I had been doing 15 years or 20 years of twittering and things and everything else. And that's how that we reached an early critical mass, is from all of that work that had been done for 15 years. And so the thing is that you want to think about things I think about things in very long curves. And so it's not a hunting and gathering. People will come up and I've seen some people join the panel and they think they're going to get something out of it in a week or two. It's about planting something and then pouring water on it over months or years, and I think, and finally, I'll just say that in every meeting, I feel like I am more skilled because we do this all the time. We're so used to being in a Zoom and conversing that you're a different person in a general meeting, both good, like you have a different presence because of what you're used to doing here. I think Mitchell's next. Oh, I can't, we're not hearing you, Liberty. I don't know you.
Mitchell?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thanks. For me, I was talking to Adam Tao some months ago, Adam Tao of Mix Effects fame, and he said, there's this thing called office hours, and you should really get on it. And I had absolutely no idea what it was. And I couldn't tell from the title or anything else, and I had not any previous knowledge. So I just started punching around one day and found myself on the panel, inadvertently on the panel. I just pushed the buttons, and there I was, staring at everybody. For me, the advantage was I used to host radio shows, and I had a certain comfort level. But what I wasn't expecting was a group of people that are kindred spirits that think along the same lines as I do, and I have a pretty intense vision of how I like things to be. And apparently most of these people think the same way, or if they don't, they contrast it very well. So I felt somehow I was contributing, if anything else, a little bit of my humor, which is a little twisted, admittedly, and sometimes, to Alex's credit, a bit of a problem to maintain or manage. But I just feel like there's something that I'm bringing to the table that's a little bit skewed, a little bit different, but still on target with the way everybody else thinks. So thank you once again, and thanks for your patience too.
Yeah, it was, I know that I've been watching prior to, like, last year I was watching, and it was because of Colin Sandy. He sent me a Facebook message and said, hey, there's this group of people who get together every day, and I think you should check them out. So like many of you who might be watching right now, you've been surveying, possibly asking questions, but I finally decided, you know what, I see this as an opportunity for me to stretch myself and to grow. So by finding a lane, because sometimes there are different days that different subject matters come up. I was like, oh, you know what? They're talking about events and marketing, which kind of bridges my world of media and marketing. And I haven't left since. So just encouraging anyone who's watching is, you know, get in where you fit in, as you've heard from everyone here. All right, next question.
The next question actually comes from somebody named Liberty White, and she said, how did you become, oh, wait, that's not the right one. How did that get up there? How do we fix the contrast with our background in HDR?
Alex?
This is mostly just lighting. So it's just a matter of adding more fill lighting in the background is really going to be the thing that you're going to do. You may bring your key light down a little bit and then bring up a little bit of a backlight somewhere to kind of fill that in, and that's going to help you. It's just evening out the dark areas and the light areas there. And by the way, I've locked most of the questions because we're just trying to finish up the first hour. And if you're posting first hour questions, we're pushing them back to you. So that, you know, you can put up questions about brainstorming for the second hour, but don't put new first hour questions in. You'll notice that you just get them right back. We didn't throw them away. Put them in the notes section. You can come back tomorrow and post them.
Thanks. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, what would be the modern day heir to the electric image throne on the Mac? Would Cinema 4D be it, or would Maya be more like it? Cinema 4D has the advantage of M1 support, he notes.
Charles?
So usually what you find in larger studios with pipelines that are distributed, you find Maya. In smaller studios dealing with more motion graphics, you tend to find Cinema 4D. Now, that being said, Blender, being open source, is now being supported by Apple and actually being funded by Apple in some ways. So they're slowly creeping up as well. And the fact that they've made such leaps and bounds strides since they started, and the renders coming out of Blender now are really starting to really sweet. They're also starting to become a competitor. So I would watch out for them too.
Alex?
Yeah, I think on the Mac side for broadcast, and that's where Electric Image really made its bread and butter, was broadcast. And in that area, I think Cinema 4D has really taken over that whole space. But Charles described it exactly. Maya is probably in the large, because Maya provides a platform to which you build tons of plugins on top of. And so there's a lot of engineering. That's the way it was designed to be. And then and a lot of people are paying attention to Blender. And then the other one that's kind of, you don't need a lot of them, but you have to have it for your effects, is Houdini. So Houdini is like this, you know, it's this magical, really, you know, like it's not, you know, if you're a Houdini artist, like there's always a demand, you know, like if you're really good at what you do with Houdini, because it does things that nothing else can do. But it's a little hard. The learning curve is a little steeper. Anyway, so L systems are a thing. Anyway, that's it.
Next question.
Anthony Bianchella in Bridgewater, New Jersey says, back to pricing. In photography, we usually charge by value, license fee, usage, and so forth. In video and production, it's day rate. I guess it's easier for everybody, but it seems like money's left on the table. Thoughts?
Guy?
Value is the key word in that whole sentence. Value to the customer. What are they willing to pay for? And I think in the early days of this question, those rules are legitimate because you were the only one that had the camera. You were the one that had the way of creating the product to hand a print or a document or a image away. I think now that everybody's got the ability to be Ansel Adams, in their hand, it's a lot bigger challenge to find the value in somebody and charging them. So is there money being left on the table? I think it's your creativity. That's where your value is. And how do you see it differently? And how do you bring perspective that is going to give them joy and, something unique in that image?
Along with the execution. Yes. Noah.
I think I see kind of three primary ways that people charge for their services or what they do, right? So there's the hourly rate, there's a project-based pricing, and then to Anthony's point, there's value-based pricing. And so I would encourage everybody to do some research specifically around Chris Do and value-based pricing, because the more we move towards that model, I think the better our lives are going to be.
Alex.
I think that a lot of it has to do with moving up the chain as well, moving up the food chain, and that you're able to charge more for what you do. And most importantly, that if you're just an individual contractor, it's really hard to get outside of that. But being able to have more people in a company so that it's not just you're providing it. What you want to do is, in my opinion, slowly move from the doingness of it to the management of the doingness of it. So it's still a day rate, but it's now you're generating a vision for a group of people, whether, so for instance, I was a DJ for a lot of weddings, but I was one of 8 DJs for this one person who had gotten really good. The way he made more money was not because he couldn't do any more gigs. Like, he was booked out or as many gigs as he wanted. He paid us probably 40% less than he got paid. to do the thing, and so he made money on our effort, and so I think that figuring out how you expand what that is to larger teams and make that more widely available, and there's a lot of people who don't want to do that or don't know how to do that, so that becomes more challenging, for them. But I think that it's photography is something that you can charge by value, but it also is something that is a vastly shrinking. You have to be really good at what you do, either socially or skill wise, to stay in business, given that my iPhone can do a pretty good job of most of the photography that I need. And if not, I can go out and buy a camera that does an incredible job at what it does, so I think that photographer, these things, you have to kind of figure out what's your business model.
And our last question of the first hour.
Well, what I see here is the next one is Alex Studio. So
yeah, go ahead. Just go ahead and do that one.
Just go ahead and dive into it. Okay.
Yeah, we're moving. We're going to shift gears, and mine when there was one studio one, because that's what we've been doing most days. But I really needed to have the other conversation, even though it's going to be a little short. We'll still have it because I want to talk through a couple things. And we will return to the studio conversation on Monday.
Okay, the question is, if you were building a new house, how would you design it for a studio? What about a work from home dedicated space?
Noah?
Oh, this is such a Pandora's box to this question. But yeah, so definitely would have a studio for filming and like doing that kind of stuff. My wife's an artist, so she would be designing a studio for her painting. So basically, it's going to be completely custom to what you need and what your wants are for that space. Obviously, with the office hours set up, I would want something similar to what we have here, but something that I could easily change background out, dedicated power for that, redundant internet, those kind of things would all be considered.
Charles?
The main thing, and this is what we actually did here when we rebuilt the entire inside of the house, was we Cat 7 the entire house, just so that we could get data back and forth, especially in this room. And if you're dedicating a room and you do have a spouse, you have to think about having 2 rooms, because I couldn't be doing my work if I had my lady behind me doing her architecture, fashion stuff, right? So things tend to grow pretty quickly, and the budgets start to grow exceedingly quickly at that point because you have 2 of everything, right? So I would consider that, but start from the basics of the room, like soundproofing, what color you're going to use, the depth of the room. If you're going to want to have that bokeh in the camera with the lens, you have to consider all those things, and where you're going to place the lights and how you're going to deal with the sound. So I would start there.
Go ahead,
Mitchell.
Oh, I didn't hear me. I usually, concentrate on sound and audio quality And that means if I had the luxury of building a home and architecturally adjusting it, non-square space for the studio so that you don't have reverberant sounds building up in the room, being able to double stud the walls so you can hang your drywall, and have that floating floors if you really want to go crazy. But those kinds of things would be helpful. These are the things that you wished you could do after you inherit the space and you're trying to fix it. Painting it a different color or hanging a grid, not so much of an issue.
Lois?
Well, I do this. I'm sitting in my living room. It's a huge barn of a place. So I'm not building a new house, but I'm building a new studio by taking a back bedroom and redoing the whole thing. Hopefully by mid-January, by my birthday, I will have it all done and you will see something bright and new. How? I'm coming to after hours and asking everybody questions. It's like Mitchell's saying something about non-square. I wonder how I can modify my room so it's not square.
And that's the best place to be. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is that if I built it again, I've thought about this a lot in my space because I've made my space work, but it's not a great space for it, is that I would float the room. I mean, if I'm going to build it from scratch, I would float the room so that it just build that in, like bake that into the build so that it is got a solid, 6 inches of air. Just between it and everything else, and float it out. The door, same kind of thing. I would have a service floor so that everything is raised up. So I'd have at least 2 inches. Someone's got an open mic. I would have a raised floor so that I can move cables around underneath without having to redo that. I would definitely do Cat 7 and fiber to every room. I'd consider every room in my house a studio. So I'd have runs to everything. I'd probably run almost as much fiber to my house as I do outlets. Just so that I know that I can get in and out of all of those things relatively easily. I think the ceiling would be either 10 or 12 feet high, in that room. I would drop a grid into it. I would definitely, if I built my house again, or I didn't build this house, I bought it, but I would build the kitchen, given how much cooking I do, with a grid. It would look nice. It would look very pretty, but it would definitely be something that was operational. And then and then I think that would get you pretty far down the road. I think that for me, I think that the proper size is about 15 by 15 feet. Or about 5 meters by 5 meters. I think that's the right size, that it's not too big, not too small, that you can do a lot of work on. Mine's about 15 by 20, and which is nice. I don't think I need it quite this big, but 15 by 20 is great. Anyway, those would be the things that I would definitely think about. Interesting thing, and I don't remember whether we talked about it on office hours or whether I talked about it with someone else, but I was on a Zoom somewhere talking to someone. There are realtors that are now building studios or they're dressing studio rooms in houses when they're showing them, going, this could be your office. But it's all set up with cameras and lights and all the other things to have people visualize what offices they could, they're just taking bedrooms and turning them in. But when they set them up for people to see, they are thinking about that. They're also, when they're remodeling, they're now remodeling for these studios, because if you buy the house, of course, the studio would come with it. So you wouldn't have to upgrade it. It would just be part of the overall purchase of the house. And so I thought that was a fascinating conversation. I can't remember whether we had that in after hours or somewhere else, but I was on a call. People were talking about the fact that they're actually, especially outside of the big cities, the places that everyone's moving, out of California and out of the cities and everything else, all these other areas are like, they're saying, now that you've moved out, you have a bigger house with 5 bedrooms. One of those or 2 of those becomes a studio. It's interesting. Are you there, Liberty? Can you hear us, Liberty? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah, I'm here. So, well, that wraps our extended first hour, and now we're going to move on to our brain dump for second hour idea. So, please, you are the producers. We want to hear from you. If you can go ahead.
And I wanted to talk through a couple things real quickly, and figure out. I'm sorry, I'm cutting Liberty off a little bit, but I just wanted to, I know we're running out of time, and I just wanted to have people think about, what do we want to see next year? One of the things that I've been strongly considering, there's been a lot of conversation about NFTs and blockchain, and I feel like that we should probably have conversations about that. One of the questions I have is, should we have so this is one thing to think about is should we have sprints and then have it slow down? So, and what I mean by that is like we could turn Mondays for 6 weeks into a blockchain NFT thing. Now, can we sustain that for a year? Maybe not. Can we run it for 6 weeks to get us all up to speed so that we understand it and then slow it down where it's every month after that? Where we keep on talking about these things and keep on doing them. I think that is the thing that that I'm kind of considering. The other things that I've been kind of thinking about, and just to kind of spark people's thought process here is, again, trying to think about layers. So like one of the things I've been thinking about is Mondays being the business end of things. So that would be NFTs and blockchain, but also how we charge for things, how we think about those things and organize those things. And some of this is up to Liberty because she'll have the final say over what happens on Mondays. But that's been one thought is this kind of the business organizational end of things. Then Tuesdays, of course, we've been trying to make audio work. I think that I have trouble. A lot of the suggestions we get for audio for second hour are things that we need external people to invite into. Those are harder, and the reason we have a hard time in December is it's just harder to schedule people the week of Christmas and New Year's. So we'll pick that more up as we go into the new year. Wednesdays are generally video. That's been but the question is, do we want to subdivide those? Like, for instance, for audio, do we want to have the first Monday be always, something to do with film or production? Another one, something to do with studio-ish, something to do with post. Do we want to break those things up into smaller pieces from a structural perspective? It makes it easier for us to schedule, but it also means that we have to get more ahead of it. Same thing with video in that area. Thursdays, we're kind of looking at, for a while it was artists. Usually it's still something like performance. My thought has been related to that is potentially potentially the artists, like that we have crafts people. So it could be almost anything that someone's creating. So we have some folks in our group that are doing woodworking and some folks that are doing, we can still bring in artists. I think once or twice a month, we'd want to bring in artists, to make that happen. But those would be the kind of things. And then Friday is kind of a infrastructure day, or that's what I've been kind of leaning towards. So like things like having AWS discussions or having, like real like nuts and bolts of organizational stuff, like how to manage carnets, how to do AWS, how to, so real structural on one end, on the other end, having it be more of the business end and the marketing end. And, Mondays are really, because all these are important components to what we do. And so the thought process was to so Mondays are kind of that, everything from the business models to the marketing, to the organizational, to those types of things, then audio, then video, and then artists or crafts, and the craft is, I guess, what I would call it, but looking at it in every different way, as well as then, and then the infrastructure on Fridays. So let us know in both the comments or the just use questions to let us know what you think of that. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Our first one comes from Brody Hafner in New York City. And Hefner, says, how about dedicating a day each month to invite a visionary researcher, educator, or industry leader to peek over the horizon at the future of media production? The first Friday of the month could be Fast Forward Friday, something like that.
Nice name, Alex.
Yeah, I think it could be Fridays. I think having someone, we try to do that a little bit now, but I think we could definitely get better at finding folks to talk about that. I think the hard part is that I have a hard time finding people that are further out than we are, to be honest. Like they can talk about a specific subject they know well, but oftentimes we very quickly see the limitations of what they're doing, and that's when we brought people in. I found that we were sometimes a little further ahead.
I think that's why I was also drawn to office hours, because of that forward thinking in the progress we're making. But to go back to Alex's point earlier, like the thematic things, and cultivating, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, what have you. I think that's a really strong thing that could happen, like a foundational element that happens like an undertone underneath what we're doing. At the same time, I like the thought of like making sure that it's not so concrete that we can't disrupt that setup, right? So, like right now, a good example, audio would be Tuesdays typically, right? But there might be a special event or special thing where we need to like take that out. So I would hope that we have a setup in such a way that that's also flexible, even though we might generally know Tuesdays are most of the time audio, if that makes sense.
The hard part with all of those is that it is, what I'm trying to do is get to a point where our audio experts show up on Tuesday knowing that they, and we have video experts showing up on Wednesday. And so the, people who are more into marketing and business models are showing up on Monday. So people know when to come, into the panel. And that's the thing that if they come and we don't talk about audio, if the audio folks come and we don't have a good subject about audio, then they don't come back again. And then because what the goal is that second hour enriches the first hour, that we have a whole bunch of audio experts come to the second hour, which means that if you ask audio questions on Tuesday, it's a great time to ask because there's just a bunch of people with really deep knowledge. Now we've had a little trouble keeping that one as we're fortunate to have still some audio experts in here, but it's not as deep as it used to be, or not as plentiful as it used to be. But I think that that's what we're trying to kind of build up in that space.
Alan?
Is Alan here? Did we lose Alan?
No.
Oh,
okay, we'll go to Sky.
It was amazing.
Okay, there you are.
Sorry. It was amazing what I had then. Oh, it's brilliant. I think Alex nailed it on the head then. We almost need like a booking agent, in effect, to be able to bring people in to this. I mean, what actually brought me in here was all the Unreal stuff we were doing at the beginning of the year, that virtual production, because that was, for me, what I really see as so important for the next, for the continuation of the industry and everything. What is going on there? But it's getting in the talent, as we said, and so yeah, it's the picking up a community booking agent to say.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I want to have this discussion, because now that the 501c3 is through, and now we're going to start to organize the really in depth. I got to start handing this off to a team, and what I'm trying to do is have the structure all. Like how are we going to do this? And so, I mean, and that team will have a lot to do with it as well. But I thought having a general discussion amongst ourselves, because you're exactly right. That's why we want to be able to do those second hours are what draw people in the first time, and the Q&A is something that people come back for. But the second hour is why many people who come to this group see it for the first time, is because there was some second hour they were interested in.
Hi.
My question is what is the value of a thing, as we know, and the consequence when Microsoft Games brought Hollywood up and they said, oh yeah, we don't do the way you do story, we do it differently, and both of those histories were very offended by each other, but Microsoft said, look, we make more money on a weekend than you do over 14 weeks of doing, the same, trying to sell a product. So consequently, I'm curious, Alex, what does the value of a SMPTE or an organization of MPEG or JPEG, what does that history of creating systems for broadcast or for messaging or for corporations, what does SMPTE have of value for us?
I would love to have, and I know some folks at SMPTE, and I'm trying to get them on to come on and talk to us, because I think that we don't want to overlearn or be limited by the past, but we also don't want to be ignoring it. I mean, if you don't pay attention to it, and I don't think SMPTE is the past, I think SMPTE is the future as well. I mean, they're making up the big decisions that are going to definitely affect us, and so while it is a different organization than what we do here, it's a very powerful organization, a very useful one, and a lot of really great thinkers that are part of those groups that really define an enormous number of things. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to partner more with organizations like SMPTE to get more information into it. It's mostly just figuring out how they want to interact with us. We would love to have them on more, because there's a lot to learn. The folks have been thinking about, when you talk about some of those standards, they have been talking about that standard for 5 years or 10 years. And they know why they picked what they picked, and they've been some of the best people in the industry. So I think that, and I've been a member of SMPTE for a long time. So a member. I don't have any I don't have any juice there. I pay my dues, and I get discounts on webinars or something. So anyway, but I think that it's a really we're hoping to do more with it, and I know some folks there, and it's been one of those things like we've been trying to trade times to talk about it, but you should expect us to find some of these groups and people in next year's, absolutely.
And maybe define what is SMPTE.
I'm not going to try to say it off the top of my head, but it's
Chris?
I'd have to have a
Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers.
Society.
There you go.
Ding, ding, ding. That's the answer we were looking for.
Courtney for the win. Chris?
You know, John Prado and I were talking about this yesterday, and I think that what we're looking for is like a series or a show producer. It's easy, you know, we're a bunch of nerds with cameras and mics. It's really easy to come in and like, oh, look, I got my picture just right. And I sound just good. And then we talk about our picture and our sound. And so what we want to look for is this long story arc. And that is what the producer is doing, you know, a level or two above what we typically spend our time obsessing over. And John and I were talking about this, about the rocket launch. It's easy to show up with a bunch of cameras and rockets and, you know, patches for our arm and stuff like that. But if I want to tell the story of being a rocketeer in Southern Nevada in the 21st century, now I have to tell a story. And that's a much bigger thing. I mean, Sky will tell you, you can sit in an edit and you can do a bunch of L cuts and, you know, audio inserts and stuff, but what is the story of this guy driving his truck over the ice?
Yeah, and the main thing that I agree with you. I think that in many ways, I'm trying to think about the things that I think make the most difference, or exposing our membership to the things that I think are going to make the most difference over time. You know, like these are things that we have to be thinking about. Like NFT, I don't know whether NFT is going to be the next big thing or not, but I do think we need to be experts at it to make sure that, you know, like a decade ago, we would have talked a bunch about Bitcoin, and a bunch of us would have bought, you know, 10 or 15 or 20 Bitcoins, you know, at 10 cents each, because we had this discussion. And then we, you know, we'd all be having really nice sets, you know, anyway, so didn't have big houses and stuff like that. So I think that we want to pay attention to trends, and, you know, some trends, and we want to try to identify those. I do think that we want to be careful when we think about story arcs. The only thing I was thinking about when you were saying that is, one thing I hate about television is the attempt at series to give me a big story arc over many seasons of there's a bigger issue that's going on, instead of, like, I like Law and Order because I can turn on Law and Order and it always works. Like there's going to be a start, a middle, and an end, and it's going to be very little of it's connected to the next episode. And I really like that. Like, so I, you know, like, I don't like to feel like because there's a whole bunch of seasons that I won't watch, because a whole bunch of shows that I won't watch because it's in the middle.
Yeah, I think that in what I'm talking about is even like a level above that. It's your mission statement, a global conversation where nobody's left out. So how does everything that we do applies to that? And then we say, okay, you know, let's do, you know, this, and then Africa, and then, you know, why don't we have more members from Antarctica? I want to know. You know, I mean, like, but like, that's, yeah, we need to work on that. We're being very exclusive.
Yeah. All right.
Next question. We're working on it, Chris. We're working on it.
Yeah.
We all wear parkas. Maybe we'll make them feel at home. Noah Sargent, Fullerton, California, says, could we use blocks or segments with smaller Q&As instead of an intro and then a larger Q&A?
Bill?
I actually found that interesting because I've been, as I said, I spent the last 2 or 3 months thinking about show possibilities and what I might be interested in. And one of the things that I've been confronting a lot is that if I have a topic, and I have a topic, but it is not this. Let's imagine the topic is movies. There are so many breakdowns of that. And if you're trying to structure a show and you want a smaller thing, then are you going to do, you know, action movies on one day and comedies on another? Or are you going to do tech stuff? How much tech stuff versus how much exposition? Are you going to talk about the writing of it? It's just so big that my tendency, as I was trying to draw out my thoughts about what would make a good show, is that I truly do believe in Alex's central thesis here, which is the conversation driven by questions, is the most important and engaging part of this. And if you say that and you believe it, then the question is, how can you introduce more than what the audience is ready for in packetized groups that lets you address more than one topic over the course of a show and still not give short shrift to the audience who might suddenly be engaged and have a lot of questions, which would expand the amount of time they want to spend on that one subject, so you cover fewer things, fewer constituencies, fewer audience peoples. It's a fascinating thing that he has designed here, and thinking about how it best works to cover a broad topic. Again, my topic isn't movies, but that's, it's just so big that how do you properly packetize it to keep your audience truly engaged?
Lois?
So I am thinking that there might be a way to have someone looking at the questions and maybe reordering them. So if there's 4 or 5 questions that seem to become a theme, then maybe those can be put together and handled as a group. And then when that theme is over and you're going on to the next theme, it's I'd say management of the questions might be useful.
Noah?
That's a great idea, Lois. I love that a lot. Origin of this question comes from, some of the second hours that we've had and just the way it's structured. I feel like the second part of it, when we get deep into the questions, sometimes my attention gets lost. And I feel like breaking up that conversation of like learning something, asking about it, learning something, asking about it made more sense to me. And I was just curious what people thought, but thanks for all the suggestions so far.
Alex?
Yeah, I think some of it's limited to how much time we have to prep each day. So I think that is, so I think that that model, like when you're doing something every single day, the amount of labor it would take to build that out, to make that work. Also, the other issue that we get into is that we, again, some of the mechanisms within what we do would be we don't have a great way to theme questions at the moment. It's a discussion. Like we have tools that do it in some other ways that are not exposed to the panelists right now, but they're not great in my opinion. And nobody does. I mean, nobody does this very well. So the big thing is that what we have found over and over again over the last 20 years of events is that when people are asking questions, they're engaged. And when they're not asking questions, they're not engaged. And it's that binary. Like it requires an incredible talent for someone to hold the space for an hour or half an hour or even 10 minutes, there's Tony Robbins that can do that for hours. There's a handful of people, but they are, the top of their game, like the top 1.0, many zeros, 1% of the world. And so but what we don't want to do is make everyone be that. So part of what we do is by not making them talk very long, they don't have to hold the space very long, because what we want are great thinkers that know their subject matter really well and provide an environment for them to just respond, and because they have that knowledge in them and we just want to pull it out of them. I think that also what we think that the user would want or the viewers would want or the producers would want and what they actually want oftentimes are different. And if we don't get that right, then they wander off, and I watch a lot of my stuff is watching the participants across YouTube, across Zoom. When do they leave? How do they leave? I watch the panelists on where their eyes are. Are they into the show or are they doing something else? And what I can tell you is that when someone's presenting, almost everybody's doing something else. Like it is, and it's something that even I have trouble. Like I get droopy eyed if you talk more than about 6 or 7 minutes. So I, and I try not to, but I'm like, I got to keep my eyes open. And so the, don't, be nice, show attention. You're kind of holding up my eyes will be up, trying to hold my eyes open. And so I think that I actually want to go the other direction, which is that I really want for second hours eventually to have a team that's building videos that set people up, like curate here's a bunch of videos to watch before the second hour starts. Like here's stuff about that person. Here's a little video we made. Here's some little segments of YouTube videos. Here's some Wikipedia entries. So like that second hour there's a chunk of stuff that if you're really into that, here are the things that we're going to talk about, or here, and then have less at the top of the hour and more Q&A. But especially in the last year and a half, everything has been get rid of people presenting, get into Q&A as fast as possible. And it has been, and everyone thinks we're crazy when we tell them to do that, and it works every time. You know, like it's super predictable to be successful.
Okay.
I love the matrix that you're explaining, Alex. The engagement really does seem to be the key word here, and that interactive engagement. Also, I realized what I want from Christmas from you, Alex. The ability to talk for 6 minutes and you not have your eyes go droopy. I think that's going to be two miracles. It'll never happen. I know. But
I learned. All I'll say is I learned this from my father. My father makes me look like a extremely focused person, and I had as a child, my entire growing up, you had 30 seconds to be interesting, and if you weren't interested in 30 seconds, that he literally would just stop, like walk away and do something else. Like sometimes he didn't even say anything. He's like, "Oh, I gotta go,"
and,
you know.
And you just interacted
such a good training
in an engagement. You were the perfect example of the spontaneity of what we can do and the fun.
Yeah.
And if we lose those two things, we're going to lose a lot of the spice. And then there's a whole energy that is just a lot of academics, and there's already plenty of that out there. So those are the other 2 points I wanted to make: spontaneity and fun.
Right. Next question.
Lois Richter's up next, asking panelists to talk about their dream project, maybe in some that office hours could implement.
So I think that interactivity is way more important than cloud production, and I'd like to see us talk more about interactivity. I would like to get one of Chris Fitchie's water machines, detune it, put it in his backyard with some Nerf guns so I can shoot at his kids flying around on their bikes and on their motorcycles in his backyard. That would be a lot of fun.
That's great.
Courtney.
Yeah, at my age, most of my dream projects are nightmares about previous projects. And so perhaps a show on nightmares of projects we worked on so that we could learn from our mistakes. It would kind of be a confessional of bad things that have happened or bad things we've participated in, and how everyone can learn from our nightmares. Not a dream.
Wage confessionals. I like that one. Tony.
Kind of working on my dream project in that I'm working with a small house of worship in 90 miles away from me. And we've gone from not turning on cameras, just having names, to possibly doing a YouTube services in February. So come a long way.
Chris?
Forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. It has been a long time since I tanked a show. So my dream project, and this is something that I've discussed, we've had a lot of very interesting discussions about on After Hours over the last several months. It's interesting, and Alex, I don't know if you've heard any of this, but it's the show that I want to do where it appears to be a highly politicized discussion, either side of an aisle or an issue. But in actuality, it's a examination of the best ways to communicate and to share ideas. And this is actually something that's like 20 years in the making. I had this idea maybe even back in the late 90s, but Zoom has made it like more achievable. And it's something that I want to do. It probably would not be able to be part of the Office Hours network, but it's a really interesting discussion about discussing and how to communicate better.
Ari?
I don't know if this qualifies as a dream project, but it's something that I've spoken about in After Hours once or twice. I am a practitioner of, and by that I mean both a practitioner and a leader of counsel in a practice that's called counsel, which is a community space where the dominant narrative is storytelling rather than questions and answers, such as we have here. And it fosters community and bringing people closer and a host of other things. And I've thought for a long time about doing something like that as a lab of sorts, a non-technical lab, a space. And I think that this might be a place for that.
Alex?
I think my two big ones are one is I really want to show people how movies get made by letting them watch a live stream of the entire process. Over a month, there's like maybe 8 or 10 live streams. We are this close to doing it. I'm in the building. We've got all the hardware there. We just need to take over the stage, and so we're very close to that one. The second one is similar to what we did on Saturday. I want to build global streams that are exploring something. So like, for instance, we talked about like exploring rock formations or exploring other things where we jump from one part of the world and figuring out a way to do that and make it sustainable. And what I mean by that is that we don't need the expert to be, the experts are at their home with a telestrator. The camera people are just there with comms, taking the video that the expert needs to talk to it. And then we're all asking questions and having discussions. And I think that whether that's a Civil War battlefield or whether that's a series of them or whatever, or a rock formation or birds or whatever, underwater, I think all of those things could be really interesting ways for us to learn in a way that we couldn't do in the physical world.
I want to continue to find ways to collaborate with people. And I think that back and forth is magical when you can bounce an idea off somebody and build on top of something else. And the core thing that I'm also focused on is like, how do I build a business or build a future that basically puts my current business out of business before somebody else does? So that's kind of what I'm focused on.
Nice. I would just add to that. I think there's a lot of opportunity around games and even dating alongside, because if we've seen during the pandemic, those are just some areas that have exploded. So I'm interested in that, have some ideas percolating. All right, next question.
Next one comes from Sky here in the panel. And Sky in Seattle says, can we have a focus on producing as a skill and the management of resources, time, and expectations?
Sky?
I would love to just sit in the room behind Richard as he organizes all of his talent and resources, and Shannon, and as she interacts with humans and gets them to look good. I've seen that happen. And I think that's a skill, but also just the scheduling of a thing, the management of people's expectation that only want to be there for their job. They don't want to have to think about the whole thing. And so the nuances of, as Bill was talking about, making a film, there's so many tiny little details. And as Chris pointed out, we're interested in maybe one portion of that. But as a producer, your job is to know at least a little bit about the person's ability, the skill, the talent, and the timing of a thing. So I'd be very interested in a deeper dive about all that.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into producing. Alex?
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm hoping to have Mondays lean towards is business models and management but Fridays be more nitty gritty. Like this is the actual, like how you do the thing. And Mondays are more of the vision of, new things and how to think about it and thought process. So it's kind of like we go from an open thing to a really like nuts and bolts, structure. Like I'm thinking of, like, for instance, on Friday, bringing Boomerang in. They're the ones that manage our carnets, and just have them just talk about what it takes to get things in and out of, or maybe even, Rocket, and just talk about what it takes to ship things and what are the things that you run into and, all those things. But like that kind of, but all the way down to like what kind of SDI cables we use and, that kind of thing on Fridays. And then Mondays are more of that kind of vision, new business models, new ideas. Number one way to learn to produce is to volunteer on the projects that the people are building within this group, whether it's me or somebody else, Office Hours 2.0. You don't have to start as a producer, but get into those teams. And because you want to start, these are going to get to be bigger and bigger and more conversations. And the way to learn how to do anything is really to do it. We can talk about it to some degree, but you got to be doing it. And the best way to do that is to get involved. And we're going to have lots of those opportunities as we go down the path.
Chris?
I think this group needs some gifted schedulers. And I say that because when I was producing my podcast, the scheduling of talent was the hardest part about it. And if somebody had just stepped in and said, "Here's your next guest," I'd be at 1,000 episodes by now in the podcast. The rest of it was easy. It was the scheduling that was just a nightmare. So that's definitely something that this group is going to benefit from.
and that's actually why we're having this conversation, is to think hard about what we want to do. And then I'm going to start, I got out where I have a rough idea of what 2 months looks like. The problem is I immediately ran into this person canceled and this can't happen. Now we've got a special event. Now we have, so I have to like it kind of, the gears got kind of jammed up a little bit. And it's the end of the year where I can't bring a lot of external guests in because it's just, everybody has some holiday schedules. And so I kind of, but what I want to do is get a month or two out and then hand it off to a team, and then so they don't have to worry about what we're putting into it. They're more worried about what it takes to actually get people ready for this event. Because the problem is that, again, typically an external person coming into the show is an hour to 2, sometimes 3 hours of my time for every single person to make sure that they're ready to go. And that's the thing that becomes a thing. But I also, we're talking about oftentimes VIPs, we have to be very careful of how we do it. Like it's not just something I can just hand off to anyone who's not done this before. There's a level of flatness that has to occur as well.
Sky?
Well, and Chris, I think you really found the key word there, because as Alex pointed out in Mad in the Kitchen, once I have who the talent is and we lock that in, then so many other details are easy by comparison. But it was finding that talent to commit, to be available at that time. The preparation, that can all be done later. And the camera, that can all be done later. But just locking in that external talent. And yes,
because we were doing it. Like I gotta tell you, like the problem there. I was going to say, like, by comparison, like
I'm just saying priorities. You taught me scheduling the body is priority one. Everything after that, it's still hard.
Scheduling people who are properly, with no budget, scheduling people who are properly ready to do it.
No budget. Oh, that.
Because that was like, each person in Mad in the Kitchen was like 20 hours on our end. 20 to 30 hours. Like it was, and shipping things. And it was brutal because we picked people based on what they were going to talk about, not whether they were actually ready to do a live show. So we have to be very careful of that too. That's another problem that I deal with.
And as we're learning how to not do things.
Yeah.
Which is what we're going to talk about on Mondays. Tony?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this has been extremely helpful for conversation with Tony Mobley, in that I've been fortunate and blessed that I have all of you to draw on for my show. And so it makes it a whole lot
Everyone
easier.
comes prepped.
And everybody has a great camera and good sound. And so it makes it great. And so every now and then I can sprinkle in someone who is not up to office hours caliber. And it's okay, because we can kind of tweak it. So the thing that I've been able to do so far and has worked is that I've been able to have my guests scheduled out a month in advance, and it seems to be working fine as it is. But I'm looking forward to continuing to do that. And I want again to say thank you, all of you, for having great cameras and great mics.
Next question.
Lois Richter here from Davis, California says, can the topics be planned and announced enough ahead so that we can invite our friends who are interested in the particular topic?
Lois?
Well, I think you answered most of that already. The only reason that that's important to me is that I have a lot of friends who are just on the fringe of this group. They wouldn't probably come and be part of the community, but they're interested in a certain topic when it comes up. So knowing what that is ahead of time, wonderful.
Stefan?
Yeah, your question brought me to the idea, how would it be if we built a kind of mind map or tree of topics, so that we can visually see in which direction do we move, and maybe see branches with not a lot of fruits and leaves, so that we kind of can put more juice on them.
Yeah.
Alex?
It's a great way to think about it. I like that. I'm gonna process that a little bit. But the goal is that we'll have a schedule at least a month out, by early next year. That's why we're going to put a team together. The other thing we want to do is figure out how on the web page we represent that as well, so that I do want to get to a point where there's a list of things to look at, but when you click on it, there's also a whole breakdown and the things that you could read before the second hour and other little videos to watch. And so the idea is that every one of these, anything worth putting into the second hour is worth having a team kind of put that together. And that's just something I haven't been able to do in my time, the time that I have to do things. And so, so having a team work on that so that there's a great description, there's curated things to read beforehand. There's, those are the kind of things that we want to get into so that it's really, I think that we'll take what already is many of these subjects. Like I think that there's certain ones like some of the AJA one and the parsec and the maker pipe where you see we just poured out an enormous amount of information out of an expert in 1 hour. And I think that will only get more intense when we build that back end and give people more warning and also give them things to look at.
Chris?
Yeah, thinking about what you're saying there, Alex, in terms of like a place where you can go and, here's some things to watch, some things, reading a list or something like that. I think what would be beneficial is if we could develop a framework or a platform, if you will, per day, where like on this date, here is a form. It's blank. And we're going to start by saying, we're going to put a title. We're going to call this Talking About MakerPipe. So then things to watch. Here's a few links. And like if we have that form, somewhere on global, officehours.global, where you can, contributors can feed into that. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, oh, look, here's our show rundown. This is what we're going to talk about. These are some things that we are all going to pre-research, so we're ready to speak intelligently. But that framework, that platform to build it all into might be a good thing. Talk about how we talk about what we're going to talk about.
I think that we could also have daily things in after hours. Find a time that like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, we're just going to discuss whatever makes sense for the second hour team. We're going to discuss the following week. So Tuesday, we came out of audio. We're going to talk about next week's audio and just have a roundtable, like just a little like, we're just, just going to chat about what we're interested in that area, just to kind of get the ball rolling, and then a week ahead of time for each one of these. But we first have to schedule what we're doing a week ahead of time.
Lois?
One thought is we vote up and down questions. Maybe there's a way that we can vote up or down topics of interest.
Yeah, I think so. I think first we have to just get to a point where we have people who can manage it. The problem is that people will vote up questions. Right now people do that right now. So in the second hour thing in Discord, people are voting stuff up. I absolutely pay attention to how many, if there's no thumbs up on a second hour thing in the second hour suggestions in Discord, I don't look at it it's not at the top of my priority to go into, but if I see like 6 or 8, 9 hands up for that, we're definitely paying attention to it. So in the second hour suggestions right now in Discord, the voting absolutely is critical to what we're paying attention to. It is night, like I'm trying to find those. The biggest problem that I have with that is people will ask and vote up things that we don't have the capacity to do. So we really want to have this person come talk. Well, I don't have a connection to that person yet. The things that are highly voted that we haven't put into a second hour is generally because there is a technical or, structural limitation that we can't do. So people voting things up is not an open-ended thing. But it definitely right now, it's definitely prioritizes subjects. There are subjects that I didn't plan to do at all. That I did specifically because a bunch of people voted it up. And then I just put it in. I go, well, we'll see how it goes. And it always goes well. So I've learned if there's 8 or 10 people with a hand up on it. So you should look at those suggestions and know that I'm combing through it, and the second hour team will comb through it as well.
Yeah, there's a collaborative tool, I think, called Mural that could be usul that just
you'll find that I'm super against many tools.
Oh.
Like using many tools. I don't mean to cut you off there, but there's all kinds of we could use Airboard and we could use this and we could use that and other things. And you'll find that I want to try to keep it almost to the minimum number of tools that we can have, because I don't like traipsing through tools within. If I can figure out a way to build it into Discord, I'll do it in Discord. Or if I build it into Mukana, we'll build it into Mukana. But right now I already feel like we make you go here and then we make you go over here and then you have to do this thing. And I find and I don't mean to be. Sorry, I jumped on it so quickly.
No,
It's just
no, just even internal, but
they're good.
I'll still put it out there for anybody else who wants to
We work
look
with
at
some
it.
corporate clients that have lots of tools, and it's just like this
Makes
maze, and no
sense.
one knows what. I'm like, okay, I don't understand what we're doing here. So anyway.
Got it. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, you talk about having blockchain crypto as a topic. What legal steps will you take to protect office hours global and panelists to make it clear we aren't offering, quote, investment advice? And he has a link there to investment advisors for the government.
John?
Douglas, I appreciate your question here, and it's a valid concern. However, I think Alex has the intent to talk about the technical merits of NFTs, the different marketplaces, how to create them, the different blockchains, and how to take advantage of the technical foundations of NFTs, and nothing related to investment. It's just my guess.
Alex?
Yeah, 100%. We're not going to talk about that. I mean, we're just having people come in and talk about how to do it and what it does and what the opportunities are. I don't think, if we tell you should buy an NFT, then that's a problem. That's got a whole bunch of problematic stuff. But I think people figuring that out or talking about it, I think is I don't think it's going to be an issue because it's just not what we're interested in. We're interested in understanding the mechanics of it, not what to buy.
Alan?
Yeah, so as the cool kids would say, don't shill coins. It is the technology we're interested in, and the things that we could do with blockchain and crypto more than let's go off and buy this or that, and that's the the interesting bit for me anyway. So yeah.
And even in the US, I think there's some things that you legally can't say and tell people unless
There's a
you're
lot you
accredited
can't.
and all of that. So we'll definitely stay clear of that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again. He says, you talk about teams. Will you be replicating the PCX team structure, Pixel Core, or utilizing a different structure?
Alex?
At first, we're going to be fairly agile and just kind of figure out what we have here. At some point, we could potentially do some of those team structures again. They probably wouldn't be the same as what we're doing here. They'd probably be this parallel thing that starts building up, but it won't happen until we have a lot more people. So.
Next question.
Laura Thompson in Texas, our friend, says, Alex, can you talk about the conversation we had this morning and the idea you shared with me?
One of the things I was thinking about, I was thinking about it this morning, and Laura and I were talking about it, is I think I definitely want to put in once a month talking about accessibility. So just really so that we're learning how to do it. And what I mean by that is understanding captions, understanding descriptive audio, understanding different things that we can do in those areas. And I think that just once a month we can bring in experts to talk about those things, and maybe even build some super sessions. I think it's something that is becoming a bigger and bigger deal within our industry, is how do you do that? And most people don't know how to do it. I get a lot of work because I just know how to do captions and lots of audio, translations, and talking about the mechanics of that, I think would be useful. So
Next
we'll
question.
put that in.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Next question.
Up next is Todd Rains in Allen, Texas. And Todd says, I'd be happy to participate in a craft second hour as a one-man wood-turning demonstrator. What would be the focus, on the craft or how we present it?
John?
I think a combination of both. I was on after hours when Todd came in and we did 2 hours of wood turning. I just weird that way. I like to watch Yankee Workshop and Chris burn his house down, but it was really well done. And then Todd turned us on to another gal that's in his industry that has a significant viewership as well. It's really great and interesting, I think.
Noah?
Yeah, I think one of the most famous people within the maker community, maker space, is Adam Savage, right? And just to take inspiration of how he crafts and builds and does his things. So he'll talk about a specific element or proper thing, but he'll also break down the process of what it takes to actually do that. So just to kind of mimic some of the things he's been successful at. And obviously, I don't know if we have any ties to him, but if we do a topical section around crafts or the maker community, he would be an awesome headliner, obviously.
Next question.
Oh, I just want to say, I'm sorry, I didn't put my name. I forgot to put my hand up. Adam's a ride. Like, he's been, we've done some stuff with him, and he's been in my office, and it's a lot of energy. So it'd be a really fun show to have him on. And so we'll see. And I've got a couple people that we have a lot of people in the same circle. So we'll see if we can get him on. This comes down to, as we put more second hours out, is promoting to our friends and on Twitter and on everything else, this organization, the bigger the organization gets, the easier it is. If I can say, oh, there's 200 or 300 people or 300 or 500 people coming in the morning, or if I say there's 2,000 or 3,000, it changes the math on who I can invite and how, and how open they'll be to showing up. And so that's why when people ask, why are we trying to expand office hours to a larger viewer? I'm not trying to expand after hours. I'm letting that just grow organically, but office hours, the bigger it gets, the bigger the artists that we can bring in to do that. So those are the things that we want to look at. So Todd, by the way, when I said we'll show woodworking, I was thinking about you. so we'll definitely have you on for a second hour. I put the bait out and you grabbed right onto it. So anyway, so we would love to have you on. I'm fascinated by what you do, and so I would love to take a look at both what you do and how you shoot it. I'd love to get people like someone like Chelsea Miller in to talk about. She makes knives out of rasps. And it would be just really, I've seen videos about what she does, and it'd be really fun to see that. And I think that, but sculptors and painters, and I think that there's something about us not losing touch with the analog craft, whether it's a musician, whether it's woodworking, whether it's metalworking, art, whatever kind of art we're talking about. I think that that's why Thursdays I've kind of held that of trying to have it be talent. Michael Krasny he's an expert in the craft of interview. And so and so we want to find people who are experts in their craft and not be limited to media, and have them talk about. I'm talking to a friend of mine that I'm going to try to bring on that really knows topography, and let's talk about what that actually means and what that actually looks like. And so, but I think that helps deepens our wisdom about what we do when we think about it that way. And I listen. When I don't listen to, I know it sounds crazy, but when I don't listen to political stuff, or mostly macro global economic stuff, and I'm not in after hours, mostly what I listen to are books about craft. So I think about it a lot because I just think that that's such an important piece of humanity and something that a lot of us have lost.
All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael back right again with, what would you think of bringing in luminaries that worked on well-known productions and heavily marketing those episodes as teasers to bring new members into the Office Hours fold?
Yeah, we're definitely working on that. Office Hours 2.0 is a big piece of that, of just having something that really looks like a show. That gets back into, if you didn't know Office Hours, I want you to look at it and go, wow, that looks like a TV show, and we're so close. Like the teams have been doing a great job. And so I think that when we tie that down, I'm going to reach out to a different group, people who don't do it. And I think we have a great guest next week. I think possibly I was talking to him over the weekend, so we'll see if he'll come in.
All right, next question.
Lois Richter at Davis, California, here on the panels. Art studio tours as a monthly thing. One artist per show, perhaps without questions.
I don't think we do it without questions, but it's just our culture. But I think that I would love to go to art studios.
Lois?
What I was thinking about is that how an artist handles what they do is wonderful, but just seeing, the finished products and this is where they do it and that sort of thing, that is it's a hard thing to do in a short time period. So if you had someone who was just showing you their space, and I can't see quite how the questions would work in that situation. But I would love to see how certain people do certain things. And I know a lot of artists.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that we can think about different kinds of content too. So one of the things that we could think about is a quick overview of a space, then followed up by a 1-hour Q&A with them where they walk through and they show some of the stuff and they answer some questions. And then an after hours that might be 3 or 4 hours long, like that we're really just digging into a subject matter with them. Like, oh, by the way, later this afternoon or sometime next week, we're going to do an after hours with this person. But that second hour is an introduction to what that person does. And then we use after hours as a way to dig deep, into discussion. But I think that we can, like I was at I don't know if it's good or bad. I was at a silk farm and I found it fascinating, except for the part where all the silkworms end up on the pavement. Anyway, so but if we go back to like glass blowing, I'm obsessed with glass blowing. I can't do it at all, but there is very few things that I will watch longer than if you show me someone making, especially when they do all the little layers where they build a picture inside of a piece of glass. I can literally watch that all day. Like, and so I think that having, working with some glass blowers or but fabrics, anything, I find artists to be fascinating to watch. So.
Chris?
Alex, I would be fascinated by seeing, and it would be an interesting project to build as a prototype, a walking tour of the 3210. Is it 3210?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Like the
we
studio.
Could do that. That's a great second hour.
The studio with the wood shop across the parking lot, and then intersperse into it. You'd have to I know that there's been behind the scenes Star Wars stuff that shows that alley being used for certain shoots. So you could say, now you may have seen this here, but prototype it, because it's a big enough space that it's a totally different thing than, Alex sitting in a Hollywood Squares box, not as, and even bigger than say Adam, we've seen Adam Savage give tours of his workshop. But it would be an interesting prototype of how to do it live, because it's a big space, and I don't know exactly how.
Oh, we've been talking about it. I've been talking to John Duncan and Martin McDonald about the 2XILM from the model shop, and totally having conversation about that process. What we want to do is put a big TV, big teleprompter with a camera on rollers, so that we can just roll over to what they're working on, and they're working on it, and then they sit there and they show it to you, and then have a little overhead, and have another operator. But we'll talk about that. I never thought of giving a tour. What I want to do is behind the scenes, like when we're building a set for the movie that I want to show behind the scenes of. We would give you a live stream all day of the guys working, but I think a tour would be a great introduction.
It's also a nice tease to, I know one of your dream projects is the behind the scenes, let's watch a movie get made, because this is what we have to work with.
Right.
These resources, this soundstage, this, outdoor area. It'd be an interesting prototype.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alan?
There we go. Work this time. Going back to Lois's original sort of question, this is an idea I sort of thought, because my father-in-law is a traditional sign writer, but he does sign writing for Lotus Sports, for Lotus Classics. So he does, whenever you see the 1970s or 1950s Formula One cars going around, he does all the writing on that. And so it's quite a unique thing. But I know wouldn't be able to get into his studio doing a live thing, but we could film a sort of some VTs and stuff to then intersperse and do some things. And my uncle's a master carpenter and has a similar sort of thing where I wouldn't be able to actually do the things live from there, but would be able to sort of bring them back. And I think that would sort of work with the. It's especially because he's not he's absolutely not a sort of in front of a camera person, so it need to be a conversation face to face. It's a way of bringing those in. I thought of it for sort of more of an after hours breakout room type thing, but whether to sort of bring in an artist tours, studio things.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely.
So if anybody's interested, I definitely want to badger him, because he's got some amazing. Walk into his kitchen and he's got the front of a 1970s Formula One car as he's redoing the GPS logos and stuff on it. It's brilliant.
That's awesome.
Wow. Lois?
So a number of times people have said, well, we'll do something here, we'll do it on second hour, and then we'll switch it over to after hours. But after hours is a much more reduced community. For example, right now here we have 122 producers, but if we go to after hours, we don't have that stream, that video. So the folks who come to talk, we're doing fine if we're in after hours, but if they're not, they're going to miss out on that.
We've definitely had more people show up. What was the one that we had? We had 100 and over 100 people at a after hours, and I can't remember what
was it. Google? Was it the Google one?
yeah, we can't talk about more than that. So yeah, so the no, it's fine. but it was like, yeah, so we definitely, the reason there aren't more people there is because it's casual. If we start scheduling stuff from second hours and people start getting conditioned that something's going to happen at 3:00 that was based on a second hour, the numbers will get bigger. Like the after hours numbers in those areas will get much larger. What I'm afraid of is having too much of it happen and people not feeling like they can have conversations. And so we have to be kind of conscious to that. There'll be some point. Right now, I don't want to do it because it's just for a variety of reasons. But there'll be some point where anything that happens in an after hours discussion like that would happen in a breakout room, or something like that, where people would go to something separate, so that people could keep on having the general conversation they want to have, and people go through. Right now, if we do that, we'll subdivide the group and it'll turn into an echo chamber. So we have to be kind of careful of keeping most things in the main room right now. But I think that as we grow and as we do more in after hours, because we're having a discussion January 5th. Can't tell you who, but if you like racing, it's good. That'll be good. But they can't talk in office hours. Well, they could talk and it would be less interesting. We have the choice of I can be interesting or I can be careful. And I was like, let's be interesting. So anyway, so you'll see more and more sessions that are happening in after hours instead of office hours, because we have people who can't be recorded. So that's another piece of it.
All right. Next question.
George Butters, Halifax, Nova Scotia. Up next, there are seniors living accommodations with some great brains, but some deep loneliness. How do we connect them?
Tony.
So this is becoming my sort of expertise in a way. What I'm doing in Conversation with Tony Mobley initially started as a conversation about technology for people at any age. And I think that it still holds true that having a conversation with seniors, embracing their technology, where they are, if they're just trying to figure out how to learn how to use their phones in a very productive way, or if they're trying to actually, in their later years want to be video production producers and create content. And so that is the idea in part about Conversation with Tony Mobley, along with, Wednesday, we're going to be talking about children. And so there is a need, I think, to bring in generational interactions, be it on office hours, after hours, Conversation with Tony Mobley, or any of the interaction shows, or that you are sensitive to all of the generation. And I'll say this. One of the things that makes a healthy house of worship is that you have all generations interacting, working together. And I would say that holds true for a lot of different things. You want as much diversity in terms of age. Your youth will keep you wanting to learn. Your elderly will give you wisdom. And so those are the things that you want to kind of promote, in that you want to have generational interaction in anything that you're trying to do. And I hope that this is helpful, George. Thank you.
Ari?
Yeah, thank you, Tony, for what you just said, because it really echoes. I have an aunt who is in her 90s. She is in a home in Vancouver. And the subject of loneliness, hers and others, really hits close to home. Also in normal times, but especially in these times. As far as content, what could be done in this type of format? Well, entertainment is one thing. Think concerts. Knowledge is another thing. Think great brains to be tapped and learned from. All of these very, very valid. I'm also thinking about community, and this goes back to what I mentioned previously. falling back on the narrative of storytelling. In the past, when communities gathered, who sat around the campfires and told stories. Stories are how traditions are passed, knowledge is passed, and also intergenerational wisdom. And I think that facilitating a space like that, both for the benefit of seniors and also to learn from them, because there's a tremendous amount of knowledge that would be tremendously beneficial.
Thank you, Ari. Alex?
I think there's a lot of folks that I just find fascinating. I remember my grandfather would tell me how he built a radio from scratch, in the 20s, and I think that those kinds of things, I think there's a lot we can do. And I think that in a lot of ways, our group here represents this idea that there's a lot of us that are, not 10, 20 years old anymore, but we have a lot of institutional knowledge that we can reinsert back into the system. But I think also one of the things I think about a lot is that there's an enormous amount of wisdom that is in, that are folks at home that aren't working anymore. And, this kind of conversation could be super interesting if the video is clear, if the audio is clear, that people can hear and see, which we're figuring out. I think that there's a huge opportunity for people to both just talk to each other, but also in a way that they couldn't, otherwise, and also give knowledge back. There's just a lot of things that I always find, when my grandmother died, there were an enormous number of skills around making the stuff that we grew up with that went away. Some of it was saved, but figuring out ways to trade those notes would be super useful. And we've locked a lot of questions because we're gonna try to way over. So we're just gonna kind of bowl through this a little bit.
Noah?
I was thinking of my grandmother as well. I got her an Echo Show, and that's a 5-inch screen that we could do video calls on. And so it's not the best solution, but it works for her. And, she's 89. So,
yeah.
That sounds like another topic for seniors. Just throwing it out there. Chris, next question.
Next question from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. As a newer member, I still find the onboarding experience to be confusing. I think that's one of the areas where improvements will bring the biggest bang to the buck in office hours.
Chris?
I totally agree, and I will volunteer my time if somebody will write the definitive script of all the steps. I will make a 30, maybe probably more like 60-second video on how to onboard. We could play it before the show. We could post it on YouTube. We can put it on Office Hours Global, but it's just like a step-by-step instructions, like do this, do this, do this, do this. I totally agree that it has to be done.
Thanks for that, Chris. Noah?
I know Alex has said this a dozen times, but this is intentionally done. So that little hurdle is kind of a barrier to make sure that you're serious about joining. And John, we're happy that you're here, and we're glad that you're a part of this. But it's done in such a way, and Alex can speak to this more, but so that we just don't have everybody in this group, so to speak.
Alex?
Yeah, that was I want to make it easier for people to get to the show. So find the show and watch the show, and relatively easy to get to Makana to ask questions. All the other things are very purposefully hard to do. And I'm gonna probably, like, the after hours is hidden at the bottom of the email that you get, and you have to be signed up, and you have to do a lot of other things. Some of that'll get easier because we're not going to be using, most people, the vast majority of people who watch Office Hours by the middle of next year, 99% of them will probably not be part of, will not be in Zoom, or anything else. They're going to be watching on their TV or listening on their device or whatever, and they're going to be getting them involved with Makana is important to me, so that they can ask questions and vote on questions and so on and so forth. But the Discord and after hours, all of those things will be somewhat cryptic for a long period of time. And that's mostly on purpose. It makes it, I know that I'm losing some people by doing that, but it's a pretty magical space, and it's partially magical because it's hard to get into. so it's a, I'm careful of that.
Well, my weekend just woke up, opened up.
But how to get actually in at the first place? We do have a huge break right now because you sign up in Office Hours Global, and I thought that it was sending out a, hey, thanks, here's some instructions on what to do next, and I'm not sure if it is or not because people say, oh, I didn't get an email. So I'm going to send out a coverage email today or tomorrow to like let people know because Wednesday might be busy.
I'm also thinking just in terms of like that first morning, oh, we see a person that's brand new. What's this what's this code? How do I get that? Where do I find it? Like
I like
that.
I do, but I also we also have people who get in and immediately see this stuff and then they're upset because something didn't happen immediately. It's one of those things like I in a traditional community, you show up and you have to kind of figure it out. Like there isn't like an instruction on how to be a community member. You kind of like just get there and, kind of sort your way out in what makes sense and what doesn't, like that's how we enter most communities. We just did it. Most of our communities, we did that when we were really little and we don't remember how that happened, but we spent a lot of time watching and sometimes annoying people while we were doing it. But we just want to, it doesn't mean that everybody has to have all the instructions when they show up. I think it carves out people because I don't actually want, to be honest, I don't want a lot of people that demand everything all up front. They're high maintenance. So.
And it's a part of the mystique. It keeps you coming back. All right, next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada is up next. Have you ever considered having topical seasons? For example, every Tuesday for 2 months having guests from a specific industry. That might help with gaining and keeping critical mass.
That's exactly what we're thinking about with NFTs and blockchain but we won't do it in multiple places. We'll do it in 1 or 2 of the days of the week so that most of it stays stable. And then there's a couple places and it might be just 1 at a time. So I'm looking if I can line up 6 weeks of it, because what I realize is, to get back to what we were talking about with the story arc, that there's a story arc to get everybody to critical mass, so that you can watch it. So like, what is NFT and blockchain? How do you build an NFT? What is the mark? Like there's like 6 things that you may want to do to make that work.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has the last one for the regular group today. We talk about discussing accessibility, but how will we make sure disabled people are able to fully participate in office hours? Will the Universe UI Mukana be accessible to those with disabilities?
Alex?
I don't think we can guarantee it 100%. I think that we are going to continue to strive for and continue to work on and look at how we can make those things work with the budget that we have and the time that we have and the tools that are there. We are going to continue to make that work. We are going to pay a lot of attention to it, and we're going to do a lot of what I call minding the gap. So just paying attention to the difference from where we are to perfection. You want to look at it. It doesn't mean that I can close that gap immediately. So I think that I'm always careful to have people be patient with anything that we're doing because we'll tend to move slowly. But we're always going to pay attention to that. And the goal is definitely to keep on including more and more people geographically, diversity-wise, ability-wise. Like all those things are things that you're going to keep on seeing us work on. But we're also not able to do all of it at the same time. That's usually a hard thing to do.
Well, there we have it. Another great Monday. Thank you to all of the producers and lots of great questions. And even though this show has ended, we still have Discord. We've got a second hour channel. So as you're ruminating and something else comes up, go ahead and put it in Discord. And Alex, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, the Discord thing is the most important discussion that you can have right now with it. Try not to talk too much about, like, put in subject matters and then vote them up and down, and definitely some ideas there. But what we don't want to do is, what we have a tendency to do is fall into actually having a discussion about the topic. What we want to keep that suggestion area is talking about what we want to see, and maybe talk a little bit about deepening that, and then vote on those things, because that is where we pay the most attention to it. You're going to help the next team, and you help me to some degree, and help the next team really figure a lot of these things out in detail by participating. So definitely throw that stuff in, and we'll get moving. Thanks to the producers for all the great questions and discussion, as always, and thanks to the panelists who look so good in HDR. I'm telling you, it's getting better every day. So we'll keep on working on that. The show is really looking good, and thanks to the graphics team that's putting that together. Thanks to Liberty, who did a great job at hosting again, even with an unruly other host, that's trying to not be too much of a bull in a china shop. I'll get better. And thanks to Bill for doing the Q&A and Lois doing the edits. And I'm gonna forget somebody to thank, but thanks to everybody here. Really, really well done. It definitely takes a village. All right, now we're gonna jump into after hours.